Hello, everybody. It is I, the Great Clement, as always, with my co-host.
Hello, everyone. It's Caro again.
We're doing back-to-back podcasts this weekend because, like we said in the last video, this entire part is going to be dedicated to one singular topic, and it's going to be about a particular sitcom that debuted in the late 80s, ended in 1998, and yet we're all still talking about it, even still, in 2022, because it recently came to Netflix. I told Caro it was one of my favorite sitcoms ever. In fact, I think it is my favorite sitcom ever when I compare it to, like, everything that I love. And that subject would be Seinfeld.
I knew going into Seinfeld that, like, there were a lot of memes around it. But oh my gosh, the memeability of this show is wild, and I can see why it's had this longevity on the internet as long as it has.
This is the kind of show where, like, you could start quoting it, and then someone will shoot back with a quote of their own, and then you'll just keep going off into quotes over and over and over again for as long as the day will allow, because Seinfeld is just one of the most quotable sitcoms I've ever watched, you know?
It really is.
It's so memorable, and so many of the episodes are so damn good that you can just binge watch and never have, like, a bad episode, really. Like, not unless you're watching the first two seasons, I would say.
Yeah, like, I definitely watched the first two seasons in bits and chunks, but then season 3 onwards is when I started watching, like, multiple episodes in one sitting. I think I did, like, half of season 5. I would always do, like, half a season in a day. That's how, like, that's at least before I started my new job, but, like, that's how good this show was. Like, I could just keep watching episodes and watching episodes and watching episodes and just never getting tired of, like, you know, the humor.
Yeah. That's the thing with me. It's like, I can't binge watch or binge play things for a long period of time. I need to, like, do something else after, like, 4 hours or so.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Because, like, even with video games, you might think that, like, Clement, you're a huge gamer. You have a YouTube channel dedicated to gaming. You must play, like, all day, every day. Nah! Even if it's a game I like, even if it's a game that I'm really enjoying, I gotta take a break after, like, 4 or 5 hours. I can't play it, like, 6, 7, 8 hours straight. And, that means I would be a terrible streamer.
Oh gosh.
Because after a while, I'd be streaming an RPG, and then I'd just be like, alright guys, I gotta call it quits. I gotta do something else. I'm really tired of playing this game. I've been sitting on my butt too long. But, yeah. Seinfeld is fantastic. I did grow up with it, and I was actually aware of Seinfeld's popularity when the series finale was happening, like 1998, when that final episode dropped. I remember the commercials. I remember all my friends getting pretty hyped up about it. And at this point, I'm only like 9 or 10 years old, right? So I'm not like in love with Seinfeld yet. I wouldn't become in love with the show until like the reruns much later in the early 2000s, mid 2000s.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of stuck with me, and I bought the DVD collections. And the DVD collections are great because they have so many fantastic behind the scenes stories of how they came up with these concepts and some of the things that got in the way. And it's just, the DVDs are fantastic just for the bonus features.
Oh my gosh, you should have brought the DVDs when you were here.
I guess, but I figured, you know, bringing over a whole bunch of DVDs just because they have bonus features. They're all on YouTube is also the thing.
Oh, okay, then.
I mean, all the bonus features are on YouTube, so I don't think they seem to care.
Okay.
And they've been up for, like, years, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But this whole podcast is just going to be dedicated to the show, and so we thought it would be a good idea to start from the very, very beginning, go from season 1 all the way to its final season, which was season 9. We both wrote out our favorite episodes of each season, and we're going to compare and contrast and talk about why we like this show so much.
I did make my list. I have it on sticky notes.
Sticky notes?
On, my computer. Not literal sticky notes. Oh gosh. But,
I was gonna say, are you, like, doing an Always Sunny kind of meme right now, where you got, like, the Pepe Sylvia board all over your room?
Oh my god. The only reason I do a Pepe Silva board is if like I would explain something in wrestling. But I have all my episodes written now, and I want to give my own experience like of I guess me kind of knowing Seinfeld, because you grew up like in the 90s, I grew up in like the 2000s.
Yeah.
So Seinfeld reruns were a thing, like definitely were a thing, like in the mid to late 2000s for me. But like, you know, sometimes you just like, you have shows that you've never watched, but you just never get around to it. Seinfeld was one of those shows for a very long time where it's just kind of like, yeah, I mean, I probably should watch it. And it's shocking I haven't watched it since, like, sitcoms are my guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I figured that I'd fix that once it came to Netflix, and that's what we're gonna talk about today.
So we start with season 1, which is literally only 5 episodes long, and it's definitely, in my opinion, the weakest season of the show.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a top 5 for this season. I have top 2, which is really just the first 2 episodes.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat.
Like, the pilot is very different from the rest of the show because, like, they go to a different diner. They actually have this waitress who was supposed to be a recurring character, but I guess they dropped her when they got to the second episode. Kramer was called Kessler.
Yeah, definitely a much different show.
He also had a dog.
Yeah.
Like, the show was just finding its groove. Well, I don't know if it was finding its groove. It just started. It just came out, and this is what it was. This is what they did with the pilot. And, yeah, it's just about Jerry trying to see if, like, this friend who's staying over might be romantically interested in him. And it's just so wild when you go back to the first episode, and, like, Jerry's wearing, like, sweatpants and, like, blue and red colors, and Kramer's in a bathrobe the whole time. And
like the apartment set looks different too.
Oh, the apartment set is so different. It's wild. George kind of has hair, kind of.
And like, even though I didn't watch Seinfeld, like I knew like what the apartment looked like. So seeing the change in color scheme with everything, I'm just like, whoa, oh, okay. I kind of wish they kept the dog.
Really?
Yeah.
Have Kramer have a dog the whole show?
Yeah. Imagine, like, episode plots, they could be, like, sidekicks or some shit like that. Imagine the dog accompanying, like, him on, like, adventures and the wild side plots that, you know, he gets into.
Imagine that episode in season 7 where Elaine has to, like, kidnap some dogs who are keeping her up at night.
Yeah.
And then Kramer's just like, I'll use little smuckers here to fucking distract him.
Yeah. Like, the potential's there to, like, shoehorn him into so many plots, but like, you know, I get it. You're just kind of feeling things out for the first episode.
Yeah. So again, the premise of the show is that Jerry Seinfeld is playing himself. He is a comedian in New York. He goes by the same name. He's got George Costanza as a friend, his best friend since high school. His neighbor, Kramer, who is always mooching off of Jerry and always going into his fridge to get food and whatnot. He's kind of an oddball, eccentric weirdo, and he's definitely the stunt man of the group, let's say that.
I call him the wild card.
The wild card, that's a perfect descriptor for him.
He's such a wild card character.
And something that wasn't in the pilot, but was in episode 2 onwards, was Elaine. A girl that Jerry used to date, but it didn't work out, so they just became friends. And they remained friends after that. But Elaine is not in the pilot episode. Elaine did not debut until episode 2. So, it's a very odd episode, that first one.
It's called, like, well, what's it called? Like, the Seinfeld Chronicles? Or
the
something?
Seinfeld Chronicles, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was, like, what the original name was, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. It's like, even like the way it starts up, like usually it starts with Jerry's like stand-up routine where he's just like doing a comedy bit in a club. But like the title font is just like white Arial. It's like the thing I would do in my YouTube videos.
Yeah.
There's no like logo, there's no circle, there's no flash to the logo at all. And it just seems so dimly lit. Like it's so dark you can practically see the cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
It's very off kilter, and You know, it's not to me like super laugh out loud funny. I'm not like, ha, ha, oh, Seinfeld, you are so funny. I'm just like, this is a show. This is a show.
Yeah. I was told by Clement and other people that I told I was getting into the show that, like, season 1 and to an extension season 2, we're gonna get into that soon, are pretty, like, quote-unquote forgettable and don't really represent what the show becomes later on. But it was still fascinating just seeing, like, what they were trying to go for at first.
Yeah. I don't have too much to say. Like, again, I chose my favorite episodes of the first season was the pilot and the stakeout. And the stakeout I like as a premise because it's like, Jerry wants to date this girl, but he doesn't want to offend Elaine, who he's just recently broken up with. And he stakes out her law firm in order to get a date with her when Elaine's not around. So, like, George is with him, and they're pretending, they make up this story in order to justify why they're at the law firm waiting. Because it's a building that shares with, like, other different businesses. And George is like, oh, we're meeting with Art Vandelay.
Yep.
I'm an architect. He's got this whole fake persona where he wants to be an architect named Art Vandelay.
And which is the start of this continuous joke that literally goes through the entire series.
Yeah.
Where he'll just bring back Art Vandelay as, like, various names or personas depending on what kind of shit he gets into. It's great.
I actually rewatched all of season 1, like, earlier this week because I couldn't remember what the other 3 episodes were even like.
Yeah.
Like, I went through the Netflix list and I'm looking at the titles like The Robbery, Male Unbonding, The Stock Tip, and I'm like, I don't even know what these episodes are about. And I've seen this show and watched this show religiously for, like, must be 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't even know what those episodes are about. And I rewatched them and I'm just like, okay, that's why I forget them. That's why these episodes are so forgettable. But another great callback that comes up later, in the final episode of season 1, episode 5, Kramer is going on and on about this business idea. He wants pizzerias to open up this thing where you can make your own pie, where you can make your own pizza.
Right, yes.
And knowing that, and knowing what happens much, much later in season 6, that is so funny. I was like, oh, they actually called back to that. That's funny.
Yeah.
So when it comes up at the end of season 1, I put a smile on my face, but that's more of a retroactive, like, you know, it's not super hilarious in the episode itself, but it's just, it gets funnier later, you know?
Like, you mean the sense that, like, they like calling back to, like, tons of things, which the show does a lot.
Oh, yeah.
A lot.
It's like we said, like, George being an architect or Art Vandelay, like, they keep that going for the whole show. Even when the show gets much, much funnier and the premise gets a little bit more wackier, especially in season 8 and 9. No, there's a consistency between, like, their past, between, like, the kind of things they think about and stuff, and they do call back a whole bunch of times, you know? It's actually really good for continuity.
Yeah, and the punchline to Vandelay, and they circle back to that at the end of the show. We're gonna get into that, but it just made me laugh so much. They built this joke for the whole season, and then just the punchline for that is so beautiful.
So, I don't have anything else to say about season 1, do you?
Nope. Other than I love Elaine. So it's nice
yeah?
seeing her in episode 2. Yeah, Elaine's one of my favorite characters. She's not my favorite character, but she's one of my favorites.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus is awesome. Like, everything she does is just amazing. So, yeah. One of the best cast you could possibly have for a sitcom. Like, Jason Alexander, Michael Richards, Jerry Seinfeld. The way Jerry sells, like, sarcasm and the way he just, like, smiles at absurdity is just so endearing. And it just, like, makes me smile every time I see him smiling at something stupid.
It's like I told Clement, like, this is probably, like, the most perfect casting I've ever seen for a show. And I've seen a lot of TV.
Yeah.
Like, I literally can't picture George or Kramer or Elaine or Jerry being like any other actor other than the ones that are playing them. So that's really good. Casting was top notch.
Indubitably, indubitably. Okay, so I guess we're moving on to season 2, which, again, I don't think Seinfeld really started getting great until season 3.
Yeah.
But season 2 doesn't have a lot of bad episodes. I think there's it got a lot funnier for sure.
I didn't have that much written for season 2, actually, compared to season 3 and onwards. But one of my favorite episodes from season 2 was the Chinese restaurant.
That's also on my list. That's also in my top 5 for sure. Because the premise is like Jerry, George, and Elaine are at a Chinese restaurant and they're waiting to get their meal so that they can go and see a movie, a really cheesy movie. But the thing is, once they get their order, it takes fucking forever. And that is the whole show.
Yep.
Like, imagine you've been waiting in line for like 10, 15, 20 minutes, waiting to be seated, just to be seated in the restaurant. That's the whole episode. And it's like, it's what I guess you hear about sitcoms a lot is a bottle episode. Like a bottle episode is a piece of television that does things as cheaply as possible. And usually that means keeping you in one location for the whole entire episode. Community had a great gag with that, with the bottle episode, where they had this thing where they spent the entire episode in the study room.
Yeah.
Because Annie misplaced a pen.
And that's one of my favorite sitcom episodes in general, if we're talking like all the sitcoms I've seen. But that's a very good bottle episode.
Oh yeah.
And the Chinese restaurant one too is like a really good one. I think like for me, I think why this is my favorite season 2 episode is because it shows off the potential of Seinfeld and showing off like, you know, what it would eventually become. Like, it's a blueprint for what the show eventually becomes. And I just like the humor a lot in it. Like, they do so much for one setting.
Yeah, like it's super funny, and like the dialogue is so natural and the jokes are so good. Like, I love that moment where Jerry convinces Elaine to like just steal someone else's food. He says he'll pay them like $50. I'll pay you $50 if you just take a piece of his food, eat it, and say thank you very much. Elaine asks George, should I do it? And he goes, for $50? I'd go into their soup and blow.
Yeah.
And also, like, there's a payphone in the Chinese restaurant, and George is trying to, like, call someone, but there's a guy who just won't get the hell off the phone.
Yeah, he keeps talking on the phone.
It's just so relatable and so funny. And the punchline at the very end, when they get so frustrated and tired of the restaurant, they leave. And then the attendant's like, Seinfeld for?
Yeah, their dinner table's ready, like. And that's what I mean, like, when I say that the blueprints for the show are here, is because one of the reasons why I enjoyed Seinfeld a lot was that relatability factor. It is about, like, kind of like the wackiness and also the mundaneness of everyday life.
Yeah. Like, it prides itself as being a show about nothing. Yeah. In that it's just people living their lives. They've said in interviews this was never a show about hugging or learning lessons. No. They never wanted to learn a lesson. They never wanted to hug it out. It is just a show about people living their lives and comedy that ensues from that.
Yep.
Which I love. You can jump in at any season and it's just funny. You never feel like you're missing out on anything. You never feel like you're confused as to what the hell is happening in the show, you know? Even though things do change and there are like arcs and different situations. Like season 7's a big difference for George, but
good shit. Let's see. Did you have the deal on your list?
I did not have the deal.
I'm a sucker for Elaine Jerry moments in the show. Like, obviously they're not together, but like their relationship to each other is very fascinating in a sense. Where I feel like they could get together, but they don't, and they even like, you know, they play into that a lot. So I mostly like this episode because like it continued to kind of go in that angle, you know. So
my number 5 is the pony remark.
Oh, that's on my list.
To be honest, I put it number 5 just because it's my least favorite of the favorites, because I don't have too much to say about it, but I always thought it was a pretty funny joke that, like, Jerry's at a family dinner and he's just, like, talking about how he hates, like, rich people, and, like, I hated anyone who ever owned a pony.
Yeah.
And his relatives just like, I had a pony. My sister had a pony. My brother had a pony. What's wrong with that? And he's kind of like backpedaling and just like, I. And then she dies.
Yeah.
Not at the dinner
Very
table,
good.
not like in
Yeah.
front of them. But she fucking dies right afterwards, which is funny. Season 2, I find, usually is carried by like one joke, and that's the one thing I like about it.
Yeah. Did you have the heart attack on yours?
I did not. I did not have the heart attack.
When I was watching season 1, I saw George. I was like, this George is very interesting. But I think right here is where I'm like, this guy might be my favorite character. I don't know.
He's a bundle of neuroses.
Yes,
George.
and I think really seeing that neuroses in, like, this episode is just kind of the start of me being like, yeah, I really like George. George is great.
I like the joke in that episode where, like, George is in the hospital and he's just like, I can't bear this pain. Jerry, kill me. Please kill me. I'm begging you.
Yeah.
And then Jerry genuinely puts the pillow on his hands and he goes, oh, it's something like this? And he starts fucking suffocating George with the pillow.
He's just being a good friend. He's doing what he asked him to do.
My number 4 entry is the baby shower.
The baby shower. That's like the last one I had.
Yeah, this is an episode where Jerry agrees to have a baby shower in his house while he's also choosing to get illegal cable from Kramer.
Yeah.
From one of Kramer's weirdo cable friends. And this has one of the most bizarre fucking scenes where, like, even for, like, season 9 onwards and stuff, like, this would be a very bizarre scene because Jerry comes back to his apartment and there's police everywhere and Kramer's let them in and he's told them that he has stolen cable.
Yeah.
And it turns out the cable man is actually an undercover cop too.
Yeah. I remember the twist of that making me laugh so much.
And so Jerry runs, he like books it, and they all pull out their guns and they shoot the shit out of Jerry Seinfeld. And the bullets fucking ricochet all over the place. So they're like hitting the food in the pantry and everything's blowing up, and they make it slow-mo, so you see Jerry like getting shot in slow-mo.
Yeah. That's definitely one of my favorites. Like, I think why that's one of my favorites too is that it also demonstrates the wackiness of Seinfeld. Like I've said earlier that like the relatability of the show, just because it is a sitcom about people in their everyday lives, was like something that I could relate to. But the thing about life too is that it could be really wacky, and I think the wackiness hits home here.
It's just, what the hell does Kramer call him? Like, my little something boy, my little cradle boy, or I don't know what he said, but
yeah,
God, that makes me laugh so hard.
And so what else did you have on your list to finish it off?
Number 3 for me is The Revenge.
Ooh, that was one I almost put on my list. It was a good one.
This is a great George episode for me because George decides he's had enough with his job. He's had it, and he barges into his boss's office and he's like, I'm quit, you stink, you're an idiot, everyone who works for you is an idiot. So long!
Yeah.
But then he realizes that, like, he can't possibly quit. He needs the money. He has nothing else he can do.
Oof, yeah. You know what? Like, this episode kind of hit home for me. Because, I don't think I told C Squared, but if you follow me on Twitter, you do. So I was, like, quitting my job around the time I started watching Seinfeld. And I was definitely on season 2, like, in March.
Yeah.
And just seeing that, I'm like, oof, yeah, that hits home way too soon. Because I stayed for a while because I needed the money. But, you know, like, once I figured out taxes and stuff and got hired to a new position, I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna, like, dip. But yes, I relate to George too much there. You always have that job you want to quit or get out of, but you possibly can't because you know you can't afford it.
And so George, like, he just casually walks back into the office the next day. Like, nothing happened. Like, he didn't do anything wrong. And then later in that episode, he plots to get revenge on his boss by putting something in his drink. By, like, fucking giving him, like, food poisoning and stuff. And Elaine's in on this. Like, Elaine and George are, like, at the bar kind of reveling in the fact that they're gonna get back at this guy.
Yeah.
And, at first he feels like he's not gonna do it, but then his boss is being a dick again, so George is just like, drink up! So my second favorite would be the Chinese restaurant, which we've already talked about. And my absolute favorite episode of season 2 is The Jacket.
Ooh, nice pick.
This is one where Jerry gets a new jacket, and he's going to meet Elaine's father for the first time because they're going to meet up. And he's played by a guy named Lawrence Tierney, who, if you know anything about Lawrence Tierney, was apparently a fucking nightmare to work with behind the scenes. Whether it was Reservoir Dogs, because he was Big Joe Cabot in the Reservoir Dogs. That guy... Even The Simpsons, apparently. He did a voiceover as a security guard when Bart wanted Bone Storm or Bloodstorm. I forget which one it was. And even, like, the people running The Simpsons were like, God, he was a nightmare to work with.
Yeah.
Everyone's got stories of Lawrence Tierney being a nightmare to work with, including the Seinfeld cast. But he's so fucking good in that episode because he's basically just this straight-laced, fucking scary as hell fucking dad of Elaine, who, like, Elaine's got more energy, she's got a bigger sense of humor, but her dad is just like, no, what the hell do you think you're doing? You're a comedian, huh? I knew a comedian. He got shot in the head in Korea. I just love the fucking uncomfortability of George and Jerry having to hang out with that guy, and just how awkward it is to know, like, a relative or a friend of someone that you like just being so fucking intense, so fucking serious, and just like, oh God.
Yeah.
Everything he says in that episode makes me laugh, and that's why it's my favorite episode of season 2. But of course, because he was such a nightmare behind the scenes, Elaine's father never returns, and he never comes up ever again.
Yeah, I can see why.
So that's my top 5. What is your list again?
So I didn't have a formal listing of 5 to 1 for this season. You see more of that season 3 onwards, but I can say that my favorite season 2 episode, like I mentioned, was the Chinese restaurant, and the other 4 were The Deal, The Pony Remark, The Baby Shower, and The Heart Attack.
Oh, it sounds like we were pretty close on this one.
Yeah.
Season 2, there are a lot of episodes that are kind of just as dry as season 1, but there's definitely a lot more hits now that they have, like, way more episodes to choose from. It's an interesting season. But to me, the show never really gets good until the next season, which is season 3. And I have a lot of favorites, and it was hard picking top 5 for this one.
Like, this is when the show started to really hit for me. Who wants to go first?
I guess I'll go. My number 5 pick is The Truth. This is one where George, he breaks up with a girl that he finds pretentious and annoying. And then she's so devastated by his truth, by his realistic response, that she ends up in a mental ward. And this is like someone who's trying to, like, do Jerry's taxes. And he gave her all these tax forms. So the only reason George is trying to get back with her is so Jerry can get his tax forms.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think that episode's really funny and how it's written, and it's just, yeah. That's really it.
Yeah, for sure. My number 5 was the Pez dispenser.
Yeah. That's not on my list, but I like that one too.
I think it's just a silly episode. Like, I love laughing at, like, really silly things in my personal experience. So the idea of this episode where, like, Jerry and Elaine are going to a piano concert or recital. It was the piano, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And the recital's held by, like, one of the girls that George was seeing. And during the recital, Jerry takes this Pez dispenser of Tweety Bird, and then he lays it on Elaine's lap, and she just starts laughing during the concert. Unfortunately, George's girlfriend thinks, or
like she felt like she was being judged or heckled during the performance. I also like that episode because like that's the same episode where George is trying to be a little bit more dominant and have more hand, as he calls it. He has to have more hand in the relationship. But as soon as the girl finds out that Elaine's laughter is exactly the same as the one at the concert, she realizes they've all lied to her. And then she leaves George. She's like, you can't leave me. I've got hand. And you're gonna need it. Good shit. Good shit.
Really good shit.
My number 4 is The Pen.
Ooh,
this is an episode where George and Kramer are not in it. It's just Jerry and Elaine, and they go to Florida to meet up with Jerry's parents. And it's horrible because it's way too hot. They're not regulating the temperature very well. And then they meet Jack Klompus, who decides to give Jerry a pen. However, it was just a gesture of good faith, and he never really wanted to give Jerry the pen, and he was supposed to reject it, but he didn't reject it. And so, like, there's all this drama, like, why would you take the pen? Why would you do that? And also, Elaine cannot sleep in the apartment very well, and so she hurts her back. She actually hurts her back, and they hop her up on all these drugs just to get her upright for the thing that they're doing. And Jerry gets like all these black eyes from like not wearing his scuba gear correctly. And I think there's just this amazing moment where like, they're at the banquet and Elaine's just like so hopped up that she's like, Elaine, this is Stella. And then Elaine's just like, Stella.
Yeah.
Such a great episode. It's so funny.
That's not on my list, but that is a very good episode. My number 4, it's weird because Netflix actually squished these 2 episodes together. So for me, it was like a whole 48-minute like section because it was, they smushed the 2 episodes together. So my number 4 was actually the Keith Hernandez episodes. So boyfriend / new friend, I'm counting it as one because that's just how Netflix presented it to me. And yeah, I like this episode.
It's not on my list, but it is fantastic.
So essentially, like, I believe the episode starts with Jerry and George at the gym, and then Keith Hernandez appears. And, turns out Keith Hernandez actually is a fan of Jerry's content. And, like, this offshoots into various different subplots that I like. So eventually a romance buds between Keith Hernandez and Elaine, and then you find out that like Kramer and Newman also get in the picture because apparently Keith spat on them during a game. And then you have George's whole shtick because Vandalay Industries comes back. So I thought this was a really packed episode filled with so many fun stories, and the way everything resolves at the end is just incredible.
I also love, like, it plays with the idea of, like, male romance, like, best friend romance, where, like, Jerry is trying so hard to win over Keith Hernandez because he's such a fan of him, and he's, like, trying to put on the right shirts, and he's like, oh, did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? And Elaine's just like, he's a guy, Jerry!
Yeah.
But, yeah, that whole, like, JFK, like, the spit then bounced off the arm and then hit Newman's right hand. Like, that is so funny, and the way they frame it is so perfect. And then, yeah, great episode. My number 3 is the limo.
Ooh, that is on my list.
So the premise of this episode, George is picking up Jerry at the airport, but his car breaks down and he doesn't have a ride to actually transport Jerry. And, then they notice that, like, this O'Brien guy who made a big scene on the plane and is not on the plane, he has a limo. And so they decided to take the limo and pretend that they're O'Brien. George pretends he's O'Brien. But then it turns out that O'Brien is, like, the leader of, like, the white nationalist, like, neo-Nazi movement. No. And so they're now in a limo with actual fucking Nazis. And they're getting to a big, like, pro-neo-Nazi rally where all these protesters are here to, like, go after it's such a fucking wild ride. I love Georgia still has a crush on the Nazi lady.
Yeah. It's just a crazy ride the whole way through. I was not expecting the twist, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, no. That's horrible.
Because like there's that hard cut where like at first George is like, oh, do you have my book? I would certainly like to have it, as if he's gonna autograph it or whatever.
Yeah.
But then it cuts back and he's reading it and he's just like, and the Jews and the black man have been holding me down. Like,
No.
he's like, what?
No.
Oh no.
It's like they think they're going to see like the Bulls play
Yeah,
at Madison
yeah.
Square, but no. I guess that is a fantastic episode.
It's the only episode where all of the characters get guns pointed at them, so that's fun. That wasn't like a dream sequence like the Cable episode from season 2.
Yeah, for sure. Good pick. My number 3 pick was The Parking Garage.
It's also on my list. That is my number 1 pick.
So basically, the gang's coming back from the mall, and they're trying to find their car. But no one can remember where, I believe it was Kramer's car that they were going.
Yeah.
So no one can remember where Kramer's car is parked, and that's the episode. It's such a simple and relatable premise that I loved it so much, and I love the humor that came out of it.
It's one of the best, like, everything goes wrong for our heroes kind of episode,
Yup.
where just nothing's going right, and every time you think it's about to be solved, like at one point at the very end, George stumbles on the car. He's like, the car! But Kramer left to look for the car, and now they've all been separated from Kramer, so like, even though they found the car, Kramer's nowhere to be fucking found.
Yeah.
Then Elaine's goldfish dies.
Oh yeah, the goldfish. It's like one of those just as you think that like it's solved, it isn't. And like the twist with that episode at the end, the whole punchline is hilarious because finally Kramer shows up, they get in the car, but the car doesn't start. They go through all this trouble. Like, I think George had to meet with, like, what was it, his parents or something?
He had to meet with his
He had to go
parents,
somewhere.
yeah.
Yeah. So George had to meet his parents, and then Elaine's goldfish died, and then Kramer came back after hours, and they're finally ready to leave, but the car just doesn't start. And that was hilarious. Because, of course, the engine wouldn't start after all the shit they went through.
Of course, but, you know, the best part about that, if you own the DVD special features, is that was an accident. Originally, the ending was that they just got in the car and they drove off, but legitimately, they started the scene, they got in the car, Michael Richards turns the key, and it just kept stalling, and it kept stalling, and it kept stalling, and you can actually see Jason Alexander start to laugh a little bit in the cut. Because he turns his head and he starts like bobbing up and down because he's chuckling at the fact that the car wouldn't start. But they loved that so much. They were like, you know what? Yeah, that's the ending. That's perfect. That's funnier than what we wrote.
Yeah.
Oh, it's brilliant.
That's awesome.
Even just the idea of like Jerry like peeing in the garage because they can't find a bathroom anywhere. And he just pisses in the garage, and a security guard catches him do it. And he puts him in the security hole to, like, you know, get him in trouble. And it's just like, well, I could get uromycetitis poisoning and die.
Yeah.
My number 2 episode is The Cafe. This is the introduction with Babu Bhatt.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, Babu's opened up this restaurant in town, and no one's going to it. It's got no business. And that's relatable as fuck, because even right now in 2022, they just opened up a Mexican food restaurant near me right now, and no one's going in it. Like, every time I stop by, there's, like, usually only 1 or 2 customers, which makes me feel so bad.
You know, I'm gonna give them business.
Yeah.
I'll give them business. I love Mexican food. Anyway, go on.
So Jerry feels bad because this restaurant's not getting any business, so he decides to stop in finally because he keeps looking at it. And he suggests that Babu change the menu because he's of Pakistani descent. Well, maybe he should sell Pakistani food. Maybe that's what people want because, it makes sense. And the whole time, George is cheating on an IQ test by getting Elaine to do his test for him.
Oh, yeah.
She tries doing the test in the restaurant, but then Kramer's the fucking wild card, and he ends up, like, burning his hands on the dough and, like, freaking out and just, like, spilling cola drink all over the place. Yeah. And so she gets cola on the fucking IQ test. And she brings it back to George to get the test evaluated, but now it's, like, covered in soda. And so his girlfriend's just like, where did you get a soda? I was like, oh yeah, I went out for a snack. I went out the window. Why would you go out the window to get lunch? But the episode's great because the transition to Pakistani doesn't help the restaurant at all, and Babu just gets fucking fed up with Jerry, who just thinks he's done a great thing. He thinks he's such a great guy, and at the end of the episode, Babu fucking hates his guts.
Didn't help him for shit, which is a common theme in the show.
So that's iconic. I love that episode.
Great pick. My number 2 pick is, like, if I had to pick an episode where the show really, like, took a turn for me in the sense that, like, yeah, I like the show. The show's great. Let's go. It's The Library.
Not on my list, but it is a good episode.
I love this episode because, like, personally, I'm a sucker for libraries. So I used to go to the library a lot when I was a kid. And, like, I'm all too familiar with late fees and the whole culture behind that. And just found this episode a little too relatable. Like, Joe Bookman especially, that's when I learned that, like, the side characters of Seinfeld are pretty much my favorite part about the show, because there's so many different characters that you run into that are so wacky and so memorable, and I think, like, this guy is literally, like, a really good example of when that started clicking for me. Yeah. So this, just the overall silliness of this episode over, like, something that's so kind of mundane in everyday life is what really clicked for me, and I seriously consider this episode like a turning point for me for this show. Yeah. So that's why I liked it a lot.
And when you bring that up, there's another character in this episode who I think is great because I've been quoting him for years, and that is George's gym teacher, who always calls George, "Hey, can't stand ya! Can't stand ya!"
Yeah.
Gave George an atomic wedgie when he was younger, which this is like the one time we have, like, Jerry and George pretending they're in high school, so they filmed, like, Jerry with, like, lawn hair and George with, like, this weird wig. It's pretty funny. My favorite episode of season 3 is the parking garage, which we already talked about. I love that episode so much.
Yep. And my favorite episode from season 3 was the limo, which we already talked about.
Hell yeah.
Like, the limo, yeah. I was laughing my ass off. I was like, oh god, this is so fucked up. But oh my gosh, it is very Seinfeld. They would get into this situation. Such a good episode.
Which takes us to season 4, and in my opinion, season 4 might be the best season of Seinfeld. This is, to me, when the show really, really finds its identity, and from this point onwards, the show is just legendary. Every episode is just amazing, and what a brilliant premise for a season, because this season is all about Jerry getting contacted by NBC to make a pilot, to make a TV show based on his life. So Jerry is in the midst of creating a television show that has George, Elaine, and Kramer in it as characters. And the crazy hijinks and ordeals that come with that. Although, most of my top 5 have very little to do with that premise. Very little to do with that plot. Just because season 4 is a banger season. There's so many great standalone episodes.
It is a very banger season, yeah.
My top 5 just happen to have barely anything to do with the premise of the pilot or the premise of the NBC plot, but, that's just me.
Yeah. I like the overarching plot. Like, season 4 isn't my favorite season. It is one of my favorites, though. I'd say, like, probably top 3 favorite seasons. But I do love the, plot that just kind of goes through this season. And yeah, like you said, this is really when the show just started, like, clicking for me even more. Because now I'm seeing the various aspects that I liked from the first 3 seasons, and it all comes together in season 4, and it just stays consistent for the rest of the show, and it's great. You did a really good job here. So what was your 5th favorite episode?
My 5th favorite episode is The Outing.
That is on my list. It's not number 5, but it's on my list.
So, great episode. Jerry is being interviewed by a college student about being a comedian, but he inadvertently makes a fake joke about him being gay behind her at the diner because he doesn't know that that's the girl he's supposed to be meeting for the interview. And so Elaine, George, and Jerry are just kind of having a gag and just pretending they're a gay couple just to get a rise because they know she's paying attention to their conversation.
Yeah.
And then they do the interview, and Jerry decides to keep George in the apartment because he's there visiting. And the way they're talking to each other is just so, like, romantically coded. Like, did you wash this pear? Yeah, I washed it. So just eat it.
Yeah.
Do you see the way he talks to me?
They legit sound like a wonderful, adorable couple. And I don't blame the college student for being like, oh, gay. So,
you should hear the way my boyfriend talks to me.
Yeah.
Jerry gives her this look like, what? My favorite is like when she tells them that they're gay and George fucking freaks out. He's just like, you want to have sex? We'll have sex right now. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Yeah. My favorite, like, consistent thing about this episode is, like, every time they're questioned about it, they're like, not that there's anything wrong with it. There's anything wrong being gay. And I'm like, I appreciate that. Like, this never, for something that came out in the 90s especially, this never really puts down, like, any LGBT themes or homosexuality, which is something I really much appreciated with this episode. Like, it's not making fun of, you know, that. For
sure. Like, again, it's important to know the context of, like, this is the early 90s, and it is definitely way more taboo than it is today to be queer, you know? And yeah, they never paint it as, like, a horrible thing. It's just, that's not who they are, and it's frustrating to them because they don't want to be seen as gay. And so they're constantly, like, backpedaling, like, not that there's anything wrong with it, not that there's anything wrong with that. Yeah. At the same time, there's, like, great moments where this guy comes up to their diner table, and he's, like, wearing a military uniform, and he's just like, I just wanted to say, sir, you gave me the courage to come out to my platoon, and even though I got discharged, you helped me become a free man. He walks away, audience is laughing and clapping and applauding, and then Jerry's just like, oh god.
It goes into themes about projection that we see in media, but, like, it's great. It's great. I loved it.
There's also an amazing callback to the contest, which I might be talking about later.
Yeah, same here.
Because in the contest episode, George is visiting his mother, who hurt her back at the hospital. And he's watching the patients in the other area, and he can only see their silhouettes because they're separated by a curtain. But, like, it's a nurse giving another woman a sponge bath. Meanwhile, he's kind of in this contest where he's trying to, like, hold down his sexual urges. And he's, like, just fixated on this lesbian relationship, this lesbian activity going on in front of him. But then later in the outing, which is great continuity and great callback, and if you've been binge watching the show, it's so rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I felt too.
But he's in the hospital trying to, like, trying to persuade his mother that he's not gay. You know? And then the patient in the next curtain is a dude, and a male nurse comes in to give him a sponge bath. And George, for some reason, just can't turn away. He just keeps watching it. Oh, it's so good.
My 5th favorite episode, it's weird because we're actually going to go all the way to the end of the season. But my 5th favorite episode was the pilot.
It's a good episode.
And I'm not sure, like, was this split into 2 parts as well? Because Netflix had it all in, like, 47 minutes, like The Boyfriend.
Yeah, this was 2 episodes originally.
One of Seinfeld's strong points is that a lot of different storylines, whether it's on like one singular episode or across a batch of episodes or within a season, always cohesively cross into each other. And I think they did a really good job, like, doing that here in the finale.
Yeah.
So there are just a ton of side characters that come back for this one, especially when they're like watching the pilot on TV. And then the twist with the NBC president at the end where he's like literally out at sea.
Yeah, something about that I want to bring up because none of my top 5 episodes really have Susan in it. Susan is one of the executives at NBC who George decides to start a relationship with because he finds her cute. But then he starts to not like the relationship as the season goes on and he gets out of it. But that woman's life gets horribly fucked up by like all those guys because of Kramer like puking on her, and they burn down her cabin.
Yeah.
And all of these things. And then later in that exact same season, speaking of like gay representation, like George finds out that Susan is now dating a woman.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I was the last man you were with before you switched? She's like, yeah. And now I'm very happy. And she's like, oh, okay. But Kramer somehow manages to woo Susan's girlfriend and convince her to date Kramer. And so Susan's really pissed off. But the girlfriend that George had during the outing ends up walking past them in the diner when they're kind of like talking to each other. And then George's girlfriend from the outing starts flirting with Susan. And then the great payoff is in the pilot episode.
Yeah.
You find out that Susan and George's girlfriend from the outing are now a lesbian couple watching the show.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
I was like, go gay representation, go. During the finale. So, like, this episode just made me laugh so much. Like, it's really a great episode. It's a great finale to the wackiness that we see with this and Weave's storyline.
I like that episode because all of the actors playing Jerry's friends have like all these weird eccentricities where like the guy playing George is an erotic mess and Jerry's just like, yeah, you're perfect. Like he can't remember his lines and he's freaking out about that.
Yeah.
The woman playing Elaine is so desperate to be in character that she's like, are you breaking up with me? And Jerry's like, are we going out? And the guy playing Kramer stole a box of raisins, so George just will not let it go. He wants to know if he stole the box of raisins.
Yeah.
And the actor playing Kramer hates George's guts. So, I don't know. That's so funny to me. My number 4 pick is The Movie.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's not on my list, but I was so close to putting it on my top 5.
I just think the comedy in this one is so damn good, and I just love those kind of episodes where they're just trying to do one thing. They're just trying to watch a movie, and for reasons beyond their comprehension, things just keep going wrong. They keep getting mixed up with all these different things. Like Jerry's trying to book a gig at these nightclubs, but that keeps falling through, and he's being hounded by this annoying comedian he doesn't like, and... Yeah. George, my favorite joke with this episode is George, he keeps like having to spend money on this ticket stubs in order to get into the building because he keeps losing the stubs.
Yeah.
And there comes a point where he does it a second time and the guy's just like, ticket stub, you just saw me! We just went through this! I need to see your ticket stub, sir. Like, you wouldn't give him the benefit of the doubt, just let him through. And then Kramer shows up and he's just like, hey, I need to meet up with my friends to tell them I can't reach this movie. Oh, go on through. It just lets Kramer through.
Yeah.
I love the gag of this episode where they're all trying to describe their friends in case they show up. Like, in case Jerry shows up, in case George shows up, in case Kramer shows up. And they're all giving, like, these weird descriptions of the characters where, like, Elaine will say, like, he's kind of a lanky doofus with the Bride of Frankenstein hair.
Yep.
Jerry's got flared nostrils, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh my god.
He kind of does.
The fake movies that they're seeing are also great. Rochelle, one woman's erotic journey from Milan to Minsk.
Well, it's like, one of the questions that I had going into this episode was like, are these all real movies? Like, I had to look up for Rochelle was like some obscure 90s movie that I missed, and it's not. It was something made for the show.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, and then Rochelle does come back, like, later in the season.
It comes up multiple times. I also love that relatable thing where, like, Elaine is holding the seats for Jerry, George, and Kramer, and she's, like, got these 3 open seats, and people are trying to sit down and watch the movie, and she's constantly being like, no, these seats are taken! These seats are taken! My friends are coming! You have to wait! These are my friends!
Yeah.
Then eventually she just gives up, and all the seats get taken.
Yeah.
Love that episode. So good.
Such a good episode. Alright. My 4th favorite episode was The Implant.
Ooh, nice.
Jerry has this girlfriend, and the thing with his girlfriend is that she's got big boobs. Like, Elaine basically tries to convince him that, like, her breasts couldn't possibly be that big. Maybe it's like some implants or something, because sometimes people get implants to make their boobs bigger.
Yeah.
So, after a series of unfortunate events in which involves a sauna visit where Elaine and Jerry's partner are in the sauna, and she gets a chance to grab her boobs after she falls. Now Elaine's like, holy fuck, Jerry, these actually might be real. And then, unfortunately, like, Jerry and his girlfriend break up, but the line that kills me, after she walks out of the apartment, she's like, oh, by the way, they're real and they're spectacular. And then she just leaves. Like, I love that line delivery. It's just so funny. And then the side plot for this episode is, like, it's kind of fucked up because, like, George is dating someone, of course. And unfortunately, I think it was, like, his girlfriend's aunt. It was one of her relatives. I think it was his girlfriend's aunt. Like, she ends up dying. And, like, you know, George wants to be, like, a good partner, so she kind of accompanies her to the funeral. But there's this really fucked up thing where, like, if he brings a copy of, like, the death certificate, he gets the 50% discount on the air ticket. And then, so he's going to this funeral, he's trying to get this death certificate so that he can get that 50% discount, and unfortunately, things kind of get, a little bit disruptive over George fucking, like, double dipping the chip.
You double dipped the chip!
Yeah, it was Betsy's brother. She's like, you double dipping the chip. And then this ends up being like this big thing. There's like a fight, and then they end up breaking up over this. Like, he doesn't get the death certificate, obviously. And he's still hoping that he can get the discount if he took a picture of him next to the casket in the funeral. So he goes up to the airline person, he shows him the picture, but they're like, we're sorry, this isn't enough proof, we're not giving you the discount. So I thought that was also a really great side plot. It's kind of screwed up, but it made me laugh. So, I thought the implant was really great because of that.
Oh, God. But, you know, that's actually a great segue, because him having issues with the airline attendant leads me to my number 3 pick, which is the airport.
Oh, I was so close to putting that on my list, too.
A very similar premise to the movie. It's just about all the guys just having this horrible, horrible day. Well, with the exception of Jerry. Jerry actually has a pretty good one. You know, Jerry and Elaine are coming back from a place, and Elaine gets into this whole thing with the baggage guy, and he ends up, like, sending her luggage to, like, Honolulu.
Yeah.
And Jerry gets first class, Elaine is stuck in coach, and Elaine is just dealing with, like, too many fucking people. She goes to the bathroom and someone stinks it up. She goes to, like, sit back down, and the food cart went by while she was waiting for the bathroom, so she has no food now. Meanwhile, Jerry's having the time of his life. He's just getting all these amazing snacks. He's talking with this beautiful supermodel who they're hitting it off.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, George and Kramer are supposed to pick them up, but they keep having flight delays and flight changes. So they're going to like JFK airport and then the other airport and then this airport. Kramer is insistent that there's a guy from his past that he knows who owes him money, and he's trying to get into his whole thing with him. And so he makes George buy plane tickets in order to get on the plane to meet up with this guy before he leaves, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And because George pissed off a convict beforehand, he ends up getting like abducted and thrown into the bathroom where the convict probably roughed him up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so fucking funny. And when Kramer's like being kicked off the plane and he's running away from the security guys, and he's running around on the runway, and Jerry looks out the window and sees Kramer running, and he's like, "It can't be."
I love that part too.
No, it couldn't be.
It is. Favorite wild card.
It's ridiculous. I love that episode.
My third favorite episode is the Junior Mint.
Another great one that's not on my list. Love that episode too.
Jerry is dating this girl, and unfortunately for him, he does not remember her name. The only thing he knows is that people made fun of like this name because it rhymes with part of the female anatomy. So Jerry and George are spending time brainstorming possible names that Jerry's girlfriend could have. One of them that they think of is Mulva, which is supposed to rhyme with vulva. And then eventually, like, his girlfriend catches him. After she leaves after a while, Jerry's like, "Oh god, I remember your name," and he screams Dolores out the window. Which,
Dolores!
Dolores! Which rhymes with clitoris. So I just thought that was so funny because it's kind of screwed up that you don't remember your partner's name.
I love George's one guess. He's like, maybe it's Gipple.
Gipple, yeah. It's totally Gipple. Other main plotline is that Elaine discovers that her ex-boyfriend is in the hospital.
What's great about that part is, like, they go in at first, like, Elaine wants Jerry to pretend that he's her boyfriend so that there's no way he'll try and hook up with her again. There's no way that that question will ever be brought up. But the tables turn because, like, all of a sudden she's attracted to him now that he's thinner. And Jerry keeps fucking with her just to, like, make the situation way more awkward.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's just like, honey, don't we have reservation at the Poconos on Sunday?
Yeah.
I think you're wrong. I'm not. Shut up.
Yeah. And then the twist of this episode is really funny because, like, in various hospitals, I've never seen a hospital do this, I don't know, but, like, you can see people actually operate and do procedures on people. So, Kramer and Jerry end up going to see, Elaine's ex, you know, getting his whatever procedure done. I forget what it was. And I think it was Kramer that was eating the Junior Mints, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Kramer's eating the Junior Mints. He's eating them while watching the operation happen. They accidentally drop a piece of Junior Mint into his body. Like, it kind of just drops and the doctors don't even notice. And I just thought that was so hilarious. It's so dumb, but, like, it's so funny.
Who's gonna turn down a Junior Mint? It's chocolate, it's peppermint, it's delicious! My number 2 pick is The Contest.
That is also my number 2 pick.
Ooh, we matched up on this one, right on.
Yep, we did.
So, The Contest, brilliant premise. George, like, I kind of mentioned this episode a little bit earlier, but he found himself masturbating in his parents' bedroom.
Yeah.
And his mother pops in, sees it, freaks the fuck out, and then hurts her back and gets sent to the hospital. And in the discussion of this moment, all 4 of the characters decide that, like, oh, I could definitely hold out longer than you. And he's like, oh yeah, you want a bed? All right. And they're all holding a contest to see who can go the longest without masturbating.
Yeah.
And so the episode is just filled with all these things where, like, their neighbor is a nudist who's constantly walking around naked, and this leads to the greatest punchline where Kramer just immediately goes back to his apartment, comes back like, must be 2 minutes later, slams the money on the table. I'm out!
Yeah. He's like, nope, done.
You watch it, buddy. She's gonna get you next.
I also want to mention that, like, they mentioned what George was masturbating to, and it wasn't even, like, Playboy or some shit, it was Glamour magazine. It's, like, the most tame thing that you can jerk off to. And it ends up being, like, a women's fashion and politics magazine.
You gotta understand, kids, this was before the internet, before porn was just so easy to find. You needed to get it where you could find it, alright?
Like, I was expecting that, like, he, like, found a Playboy issue or something, but no, it's just, okay, Glamour, cool. Okay, George.
I love as that episode goes on, they get more and more frustrated because they're just so pent up sexually. And, like, there's this great moment where we get to see all of them sleeping. Jerry's tossing and turning, George is just staring at the ceiling, Elaine's struggling with the blankets. Cut to Kramer, sleeping like a baby. Kramer's just, like, perfectly fine.
And, like, of course, this is, like, I'm not sure what this show... Actually, I don't think TV ratings were a thing back in the early 90s.
I know they have to be very careful with how they word things, because, like, they couldn't say that they were masturbating, and they never technically say the word masturbation.
Yeah, I was gonna say because, like, I wasn't sure if, like, Seinfeld was rated TV PG or TV 14 back when it was airing at NBC, but I realized that, like, in the early 90s, the current TV rating system as it exists today wasn't a thing. So, like, I wasn't sure how much they could get away with it. Like, they did get away with it based on the language that they used, but, like, it is very obvious. Like, King of the Castle, Master of my domain.
Yeah, it's just really funny how they write around it, just constantly saying, like, you know, I was alone, and everyone just goes, oh, you know. I think that episode got an Emmy for how it was written. I think that was, like, the most popular episode of that show.
It deserves it. It's so smart how they wrote around it. So since, like, we kind of had the same number 2, I'm just gonna make this quick mention, because my number 1 was an episode that you already mentioned, Clement, and it was The Outing. The Outing was so funny. Yeah.
My favorite episode of season 4 we haven't talked about yet. I chose The Bubble Boy.
Oh, yeah. That was on my preliminary list. I love the Bubble Boy too. He's one of my favorite side characters. I love the Bubble Boy in this episode, and how, like, how George argues with the Bubble Boy while they're playing, what was it playing? Trivial Pursuit.
Yeah, they're playing Trivial Pursuit.
Yeah.
It's just, I always love George's, like, smug satisfaction over the fact that the Bubble Boy got the piece of trivia wrong, because he's just like, oh no, I'm so sorry, it was the moops. There's no moops, you idiot, it's a misprint, it's Morse. Sorry, but the card says moops. I also like the plot of, like, Jerry and Elaine. George speeds off so quickly. They're supposed to be going to this Bubble Boy to do a performance for Jerry, because he's just doing a thing on the way to Susan's cabin.
Yeah.
But George is so fast behind the wheel, and I find that fucking relatable as hell, because I've had friends who just don't slow the fuck down, and you're supposed to be following them, and that's so frustrating.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But George speeds off so quickly that, like, Jerry loses him, and he doesn't know where to go. He doesn't know where the cabin is. He doesn't know where the Bubble Boy lives. It was all George. So he ends up stopping in a diner, and he gets into this whole thing with the diner lady because he gives him an autograph, but he hates the joke that he made. Nothing's finer than being in your diner.
Yeah.
That's what he writes. But he hates the joke, and he wants to redo it, and they won't let him have the fucking autograph back because it's the only autograph he brought.
Yeah.
And they just get into this whole thing, and it's just so funny. The Bubble Boy is just such a weird, eccentric character, and everything about that episode, and how Kramer ends up burning the cabin down at the end.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that is the episode where the cabin burns down, and I'm just laughing so much.
It's something else. It's something else.
Mm-hmm.
Special shout out to Joe Davola, Crazy Joe Davola. I thought he was a fun character.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Joe Davola in my in the pilot, because he does play a big part in the pilot.
There's that one episode that's dedicated to him, that's like the opera, where it's like the first moment where there's like a tense, like, moment in Seinfeld where the comedy kind of drops for just a little second, where Elaine inadvertently finds out that, like, Joe DeVoe has been stalking her and taking photos of her, and, like, he's got a shrine in his apartment just dedicated to Elaine, and Elaine stumbles upon this, and he's like, would you like to come with me in my dark room? And she's like, sorry, I'm a day person. And, like, he closes the door, and, like, he headbutts the fucking door. And it's so fucking tense. And she ends up having to pepper spray him just to get away. And that's, like, that one moment where you're like, oh shit, Elaine's in trouble.
Yeah.
But Joe DeVoe is a wacky character, and he was fun.
He's really great here.
And yeah, season 4 is amazing. Season 4 is awesome.
All right. Now we're going to move into season 5. And what did you think of season 5 overall?
Season 5's great. I love that they made George's parents such a center of it, because, like, George,
yep,
he doesn't have a job and he can't pay for his apartment, so he ends up moving back in with his parents.
Yeah.
And this is where we get Estelle and Frank Costanza, who are just the most dysfunctional, the most, like, you would never want them to be your parents, but at the same time, a lot of people probably relate.
Yeah.
And, oh my god, they're just perfect. Which, by the way, horrible timing for you, Caro, because you just started watching the show, and, like, all these Seinfeld actors keep dying, unfortunately. Like,
I know, that's the freakiest shit to happen, because, like, when I started watching the show, Estelle Harris passed away. Rest in peace to her.
Yeah.
And then, right as I was getting to season 9 and ending the show, Jerry's mom dies. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's really horrible.
Jerry Stiller died a little bit before you started watching the show, but it was like, it was this year.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've always loved him in so many things, like King of Queens, and he's in Zoolander, and God, he was a brilliant comedian, and I was just like, oh no, fucking Frank Costanza died? Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, it's really sad.
It's just crazy. But, you know, their legacy will live on in Seinfeld as the parents of George Costanza, because, oh my god, there's so much dysfunction there, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Also, do you have The Opposite on your list?
It was on my preliminary list, but it is not on my top 5. Do you have the puffy shirt on your list?
I do not.
I want to talk about the puffy shirt as well, because it was also very close to making my top 5, but didn't.
But I love the season finale, The Opposite, because the whole premise is that George, he's just on the lowest point he's ever been, where he's living with his parents, things suck, and then Jerry just brings up the idea, well, you know, if everything you do is wrong, the opposite would have to be right. And this whole episode is just like George doing the opposite of what he would normally do, and somehow he scores a hot date. Somehow he's a badass at a movie theater. And then he gets a job with the New York Yankees, and what he would do is suck up. But instead, he does the opposite and tells Mr. Steinbrenner, quite frankly, I am appalled by how you've been managing this fine baseball company. And Steinbrenner goes, hire this man.
Yeah.
George becomes a huge success by doing the opposite of what he's always done. And this actually is like an ethos that people have adopted, like, where, you know what? I should do the opposite of anything I ever do and see how that works out for my life.
Maybe I should do that.
Oh, God.
I don't know. Oh, gosh. Caro, maybe you shouldn't spend 20 minutes when you wake up, like, checking Discord and just get out of bed. I like the puffy shirt because, like, this shirt is, like, puffy. And basically the premise of this episode, it's adorable. It's a cute shirt.
I'm sorry, the way you phrased that. I like the puffy shirt because it's puffy.
Yeah. I would wear it on the Today Show if I was Jerry. Unfortunately, Jerry reluctantly wears the puffy shirt. I've also seen, like, a ton of wrestling memes with the puffy shirt.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But we'll get into, like, Seinfeld wrestle posting later. But I just thought the premise of this episode was super, super silly. And, like, it's funny how he gets on the show and, like, they make fun of the shirt.
But yeah, my number 5 is The Fire.
Oh, that is on my list. It's not number 5, though.
It's a great premise where, like, well, the fire is referring to George just being an absolute fucking coward.
Yeah.
Like, he's at his girlfriend's son's birthday party, and there's a clown. He keeps talking like Bozo the clown to the clown, but he doesn't know who the hell that is. He's like, oh, Eric the clown, doesn't know who Bozo is.
Yeah.
But by the way, Eric the clown, played by Jon Favreau.
Yeah, I didn't know that was Jon Favreau until he told me.
Who you may know as Happy Hogan in the MCU movies.
Yeah.
But, I just love he sees fire in the kitchen. First instinct, fucking just barrel out, run, screaming for his life, knocks over the clown, knocks over the grandma, fucking pushes all the kids out of the way. It was an inferno in there, I tell you, an inferno!
Yeah, he's not even saving anyone's life. Just kind of runs out for himself.
But I also like this episode because Kramer's girlfriend is like this really annoying woman that that works with Elaine, who she just can't stand. She's just like, oh, I love to laugh. Oh, laughing so good. Oh, like she's just so eccentric. And then she goes to see Jerry's act, and she's just constantly laughing, saying, that's so true. Ah! And everyone's just like looking at her. And it gets to the point where like Jerry says like, men hunt for TV and women just nest. And then she's like, boo, boo, boo. And so he goes to Pendant Publishing to heckle her, which causes her to run out, like freak out and run into the street and get run over by a car, and it runs over her pinky toe.
Oh, yeah.
And then Kramer has to rush the pinky toe to the hospital, and he has this amazing story where he goes and commandeers a bus that's being hijacked by some burglars.
I know.
To which George responds, "You're Batman!" And Kramer goes, "Yes, I am Batman." And it's like, I love how those stories all interweave. Because like the relationship of Elaine with the coworker who is dating Kramer, who heckles Jerry, like all three of those characters are intertwined in this storyline in such a masterful way, which I think that like they do that all the time, where they tie in all the individual stories into each other, and it's just so well done how that's written.
I love the ending of this episode too. They're at the comedy club, and George is just trying to apologize to her, and he wants a second chance. But then he sees someone holding a gun, and Jerry's doing his routine, and George screams just like with the fire earlier, "Oh my god, someone has a gun!" And it causes everyone to panic. So we circle back to that exact paranoia that George has earlier in the episode. And I thought that was brilliantly done.
It's so good. It's so good. But that's my number 5.
My number 5 was the non-fat yogurt.
It's not on my list, but it's good.
There's a new frozen yogurt shop that opens in town, and the gang kind of eat there. And the thing is that the yogurt is advertised as non-fat. There's this joke that's so hilarious. Wasn't it like the yogurt owner's son was cursing, and then Jerry's trying to get him to stop cursing?
Yes. Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So I thought that whole plotline was so funny. And then Jerry ends up cursing himself again because, like, this kid ends up destroying one of his tapes.
I love that moment the best, because he's just like, "Ah, what are you doing, you little shit?"
Yeah. So I thought that was really funny. But, like, the main plot of this episode is that, Jerry and Elaine gain weight. And they think that they gain weight because of the yogurt. Which means that the yogurt might not be so non-fat.
The only bad thing about this episode is that fucking Rudy Giuliani's in it.
I know, dude. Like, it was such a young Rudy Giuliani, and that's who the blood sample belongs to. And I'm seeing him in this episode, and I'm like, oh my gosh. No. No.
That fucking weirdo.
I know. But it turns out that the yogurt has fat, and then the business, like, the business they end up having to switch yogurts. And it's funny at the end because the kid comes up to Jerry again and he cusses at him and then just leaves. He's like, thanks for ruining my father's fucking business or something like that. Yeah.
My number 4 is the pie.
Ooh, that's a good one. That is not on my list, but that is a good one.
So in this episode, Jerry's girlfriend won't take a bite out of the pie that they're sharing at the diner, and he's fascinated by it.
Yeah.
But then she takes him to Poppy's restaurant, where goes to the bathroom, and the main chef, Poppy, he's like, "Oh, tonight I'm gonna make you a fine dinner for you and the mariachi." Grabs his dick, walks out the bathroom. Jerry looks, realizes he didn't wash his hands. Yeah. Oh, fuck. And so they're served the pizza, they're served the pie. And Jerry won't take a bite. And he does this thing where he's like gesturing like a child, like, no. Fucking love that. It's so funny to me. And also, this is the episode where Elaine spots a mannequin that looks exactly like her.
Oh, yeah, the Elaine mannequin.
She's fascinated by this, and she wants to know where the hell it came from and why, because it looks exactly like her. And then she ends up stealing it, which is great, because then later Kramer can make out with it, trying to pretend he has a girlfriend.
Yeah.
Also, there's a moment where George, because he's in the shop waiting for, like, a sale to happen, he sees them, like, undress the mannequin. And it's, like, the closest you're going to get to, like, Julia Louis-Dreyfus being topless. And it's so weird.
I know.
So that episode's amazing.
It did make my preliminary list. It's just so hard to narrow down these episodes to 5.
It's a good show. There's too many episodes to choose from. I'm surprised we haven't had a lot of overlap. We've actually had a lot of differences in our lists so far.
Yeah. But, like, I feel like that's a good thing, though. Because, like, each episode is so good that, like, I feel like people would have varying different lists. Anyway, so my 4th favorite episode was The Marine Biologist.
Damn good episode. Again, not on my list, but damn good episode.
Yeah, I just love the idea of George fronting as a marine biologist and trying to keep up the facade of being a marine biologist, but as we know with George, because, you know, of his personality, of course he would kind of have, like, a shaky time trying to keep that up.
But the setup of that is even better, because, like, Jerry meets an old friend, and, like, oh, how's George doing? And so, in order to make George seem better than he is, again, he's living with his parents in this season. Mm-hmm. He just says that he's a marine biologist. I don't know why that pops into his head, but that's what he says. And George even gets offended, but he's just like, why would you make me a marine biologist? And he's like, I don't know. You know that I've always wanted to be an architect. My personal favorite fake job is architect.
Yeah.
I love that.
I especially love the last punchline of this episode. Because, what was it? Like, there was something, like, on the beach. It was, like, some sort of, like, whale. Yes, a whale.
A whale had washed up on the shore, and it was just stuck on the shore, and there was something wrong with it. And so, of course, because George is walking by when it happens, and his girlfriend believes that he's a marine biologist, they all look to him, and he's like, oh, God. And he has to do it, otherwise his facade is over.
Yeah.
And he goes out, and there's a great end monologue where we don't actually see it, but he just tells us what happened, where he got on top of the whale, and he looked into the blowhole, and he reached out and grabbed a Titleist golf ball, which we established earlier in the episode, that Kramer was hitting golf balls into the sea, into the ocean. So he's the one who plugged up that whale's blowhole.
Yeah.
And it's thanks to that George became a hero to all these people as a fake marine biologist.
Again, the strong point of this show is everything just tying back into one. I remember, like, seeing that scene for the first time and I'm losing it, and then, like, the audience is just losing their shit for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh. That punchline was just beautiful.
And again, it's a testament to how good the dialogue is, because it reminds me of The Fire, where I talked about how Kramer gives this big spiel about how he delivered the pinky toe to the hospital and how he commandeered the bus and all that stuff. And we never see it. It's never shown on screen. We're just going off of one person's dialogue of him describing what happened. Same as George with the marine biologist. So, like, the writing is so good that, like, you're not actually seeing it, but you're just being told what happened, and it's so captivating just by the way they're describing the story. Like, they're such good storytellers that it's such a fantastic watch.
It really is. So yeah, Marine Biologist is one of my favorite episodes of season 5. So yeah, good stuff.
Nice. My third pick is The Dinner Party.
That's on my list.
Very similar to The Airport, the movies, the Chinese restaurant, where it's just kind of a situation where the 4 friends are trying to do something and things are just going horribly wrong outside of their control, where they go to a bakery and they're trying to get this one particular piece of cake and they're waiting in line too long and it gets sold out and they have to get something else. Meanwhile, fucking Kramer and George are trying to get wine, which I love. I love George's line at the beginning. I always related to it so much as a kid when I first saw it, because George is just like, he hates the idea that they have to give gifts to a person just because they're having a party. Like, why do we have to buy him a gift? And she's like, it's the respectable thing to do. It's rude to bring nothing to a party you've been invited to. He goes, yes, that's the way society works.
Yeah.
Why are we getting wine? Pepsi's way better than wine. Who loves wine more than Pepsi? Pepsi's way better than wine. Yeah, George, we're going to bring a 2-liter jug of Pepsi to the party. Oh, I love that dialogue. It's so good.
Yeah, that's the whole episode. It's great.
There's a fucking weird, eccentric, oddball character when, like, Elaine is, like, sitting down waiting for things to happen. And then her hand gets crushed by this guy with crutches. Like, her hand gets crushed. She goes, watch what you're doing. And the guy just goes, sorry.
Yeah.
It's the only dialogue he has. He just leaves as soon as this happens. But just this weird oddball fucker who we never see again ever in the show going, sorry.
Yeah. And then there's the gag of the black and white cookie. And then Jerry turns it into, like, a metaphor for, like, racial relations.
Yeah. And then it ironically gets him sick and he throws up for the first time in like 10, 15 years or something.
Yeah, the vomit streak. My number 3 was The Briss.
That is my number 1. I loved that episode.
Mm-hmm. The Briss was so good. Like, I think it's a pretty underrated episode. Because I've heard people before talk about different favorite episodes, but, like, I think The Briss is also really good. The gang have this friend that they meet up with who had a baby.
You gotta see the baby!
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. And basically, they're asked if Jerry and Elaine want to be the baby's godparents and stuff. And there's also something super fucked up that happens in the beginning of that episode too.
Which I love.
Yeah.
I love it.
So, like, so George parks the car, like, in the parking lot at the hospital. And then there's a patient who, I guess, like, something happened and he just, like, jumps off the roof of the hospital and ends up landing on George's car.
I love how they immediately make the punchline, like, they don't make it serious or, like, tragic. It's just, as soon as they're all shocked and horrified that someone's landed on the car, George's first instinct is just to go, my car! My car! He doesn't care about the person who died. It's all about the car.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. And this whole time, Kramer, he spots a person who looks like a pig, so he thinks there's a pig man and a secret government conspiracy to raise pig men in the hospital. And he keeps trying to find this pig man again throughout the whole episode.
Yeah.
But it all culminates for me with the moil.
Yeah,
they bring this moil to the baby to circumcise it, which Kramer is totally against. And I love this line that Elaine has where, like, hey, Elaine, you ever seen one that wasn't circumcised? She goes, yeah. And what do you think? And she just gives this look like, like,
yeah.
It had no face. It had no personality. The fucking Moyle, oh my god, he's just this fucking crazy ass character who's just like, where's the baby? I need the baby. Ah! And the minute he goes to like cut the baby, he just cuts to him and he's just like shaking and his head's like tilting and bobbing. And of course, he's a horrible Moyle and he ends up cutting off Jerry's finger.
Yeah.
The Moyle circumcised my finger. I love how eccentric those characters are, and I love the way the dialogue is written. It's so fucking goofy. I just love this sense of humor where like Jerry and Kramer are walking through the hospital, and Kramer's trying to find the pig man, and Jerry like immediately goes, "Oh God!" and he like holds back Kramer, like, "Oh God! Oh wait, it's just George."
I also love how Kramer just tries to get the baby because he's so disturbed by, like, how bruises are.
There's such a great,
yeah.
like, he's so good at fucking sound effects, like Michael Richards. He's so good at doing these goofy sound effects and exaggerations. I love when he's just talking with the family at the couch and he's just like, this is going to be the first day in the world and you're just going to cut it off.
And the whole twist of that episode is that, like, the parents don't even, like, end up officially designating Jerry and Elaine as godparents. They give it to Kramer.
Yeah, because he cared the most. He cared the most. And then the episode literally ends with a Godfather parody where he just closes the door on him. It's so good.
It's amazing.
So that's my number one of season 5. I watch that and I never get tired of it. Just the whole idea of George trying to get reimbursed because a man killed himself on his car. And even the gag, we never saw the car at all until Jerry got his finger cut off.
Yeah.
And then when they're driving to the hospital, you see how caved in it is and stuff. It's like, oh, it gets me every time. Gets me every time.
What was your number 2?
My number 2 is The Stall.
Ooh, I love that one. That's a good one.
This is one where Elaine is at the movies and she's in a stall and she doesn't have toilet paper and she asks if the person next door can spare a square. Sorry, I can't spare a square. I don't have any to spare. And this woman ends up being Jerry's girlfriend. And Jerry, upon just hearing both of their stories, keeps trying to hide the fact that like he's dating the woman who denied Elaine a square in the stall.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, she is dating this bro-y guy who is what Jerry describes as a himbo. No, he's a male bimbo. He's a mimbo.
Yeah. Mimbo.
And George has a man crush on this guy and wants to do everything with him, but then he gets roped into going rock climbing with him, which makes him inadvertently not pay attention because he made sandwiches for this guy. And he fucking falls off and, like, horribly injures his face, which is the only thing Elaine cares about.
Yeah.
Oh, God, again, the stories intertwine so beautifully because this woman pisses off Elaine in the stall. She is dating Jerry. But also, in the meantime, Kramer is using Jerry's phone for phone sex hotlines.
Yeah.
And he hears Jerry's girlfriend's voice, and it is so identical to the woman he's been phone sexing with that he thinks it's her. And then at the very end, very end, when Elaine gets revenge, and they both end up in the bathroom again, and she manages to get all the toilet paper, and she runs out and throws it onto the diner table. The girlfriend comes out, and she's like, I don't want to see you ever again, to Jerry. And then she goes to Kramer, you either.
Yeah.
Perfect episode.
It's so good.
That is amazing. I love that episode.
It's such a great episode. So beautiful how they like intertwine like that.
It's such a good show.
It is. All right. So, my number 2 and my number 1 episode we already talked about. So my number 2 episode was The Fire, and my number 1 episode was The Dinner Party.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, that's season 5. We didn't really talk too much about George's parents, but they were a big part of the season, and
oh yeah,
that dysfunction is what makes George such a fascinating character. Just the fact that he's living with these crazy characters. I love the Chinese woman episode because, like, she thinks she's getting advice from a Chinese woman, Donna Chang.
Yeah.
Because they hear her name, Donna Chang, and she's only heard her over the phones because her phone gets crossed over with George's, and there's a miscommunication there. And then when Jerry introduces Donna Chang to Mrs. Costanza, she's like, "You're not Chinese!"
Yeah.
"I thought I was getting advice from a Chinese woman!" Well, that settles everything. The divorce is back on, and George is like, "What? What are you talking about?"
Oh my god, yeah.
"She's not Chinese! I was duped!" "You want a divorce? You got it!
You got it! Oh my gosh.
Love those two characters so much. They're so funny.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. But they got the most screen time in season 5 because George was living with them, and oh my god. Just perfect. Perfection. Yep. So anyway, it takes us to season 6, and the only through line story-wise with season 6 is that we first get George working at the Yankees, which he's never done before, and Elaine is now working for Mr. Pitt.
Yep.
She's working as an assistant for this weird eccentric man named Mr. Pitt. And that's pretty much it. Every other episode, it's just kind of a standalone thing.
Also known as the surgeon from Drake and Josh.
See, now we have to get into this because this is something you were communicating to me as you kept going through this show, which I'm not familiar with at all. But please, enlighten me.
Like, every time that there was a guest star, and this happened a lot, by the way. This was very frequent. Like, every time there was a guest star, whether it was, like, Mr. Lip, or one of Jerry's girlfriends, or a side character, I would always be like, "Oh my gosh, it's so-and-so from insert Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, 2000 sitcom here." So, Mrs. Costanza is Estelle, or, what's her name? Like, Muriel from The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. And then this guy I mentioned is the surgeon from Drake and Josh. And then one of Elaine's partners was the foam finger salesman in Drake and Josh. And it happened a lot. And, like, Clement's over here like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, yeah, you know.
It feels like a video that needs to be made. It needs to be a video that's like Seinfeld actors in Disney children's sitcoms or something.
Like, in this season, with season 6, we meet, this character named, Kenny in the Soup.
Kenny Banya.
Yeah, and Kenny's actor was the talent agent in A Sweet Life of Zack and Cody episode where they make a commercial for the Tipton Hotel. So when I saw him in the Soup, I was like, "Oh, wait, it's that guy!" He was the one who, like, ordered the commercial. So, yeah, it happens a lot, and it's been fun blowing this boy's mind.
Jesus.
But it also kind of shows off how young I am, so...
Oh, boy. But, season 6, number 5 for me is the Fusilli Jerry.
That is on my list, yes.
Hell yeah. Ridiculous premise where Kramer is making fusilli pasta versions of all of his friends, and he makes one for Jerry. And Kramer, for some reason, his license plate gets mixed up, and now he is known as the Ass Man.
Yeah.
"I'm an ass man. Yeah, I'm an ass man." Which again ties into the story so beautifully because, yeah, he's thinking like, "Oh, the license plate must belong to a proctologist." And then later, George's dad comes in, and he's really frustrated about Kramer apparently putting a move on Estelle. He stops short, where apparently you're in a car, and you stop the car, and you put your arm over a woman's breasts in order to feel them.
Yep.
Kramer apparently did that with George's mom, so he comes in to yell at him and fight him, and falls over and fucking lands on Fusilli Jerry.
Yep. Poor Fusilli Jerry.
They have to go to a proctologist, where they happen to see that the guy has a boat that's labeled Ass Man. I love he goes, "You're the Ass Man," and the guy just winks. Just winks, and that's it.
Yeah.
Great episode.
You pretty much nailed down why I like Fusilli Jerry. Actually, we have another overlap here because that was also number 5 on my list.
So my number 4 then would be the Jimmy.
Ooh. Good one. It made my preliminary list, but wasn't on my top 5.
There's a guy who calls himself Jimmy, who refers to himself in the third person. Like, Jimmy doesn't like that. Jimmy likes it. Jimmy did. This is an episode where Kramer, he gets like really, really numb from like a head injury and then the dentist, and he comes off like he has special needs. And he somehow gets roped up into the Mel Torme banquet where he ends up getting sung a song because they think he's retarded.
Yeah.
That whole ending part where Mel Torme is singing to him, and it's like the most beautiful song in the world, but at the same time, Kramer is acting like an idiot.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's just... I just love that ending so much. And Jimmy's a funny episode. I like it a lot. It's my number 4.
Awesome. My number 4 was The Race. Throughout the show, you see that, like, Jerry has, like, what exactly of Superman does he have in his, like, apartment? Like,
he has a figurine of Superman on the shelf.
Yes. So you kind of really see that kind of, like, Superman vibe going on here in this episode.
He constantly references Superman throughout the show. Like, all the time. And this is the first time he has a girlfriend who reminds him of Lois Lane.
Yeah. His girlfriend is working for someone who was, like, his rival. And, like, there's this whole, like, kind of lore behind Jerry and this guy. Like, apparently, like, in high school, they had, like, this race, but what his rival was trying to argue is that Jerry got a head start that no one noticed and ended up winning this race. The entire episode culminates in, like, this race, and, like, all of his high school mates are coming back. And Jerry's kind of worried that, like, his own reputation and kind of, like, the mystifying thing that he's, like, portrayed because he won this race in high school will, like, go away. So then, like, the race is starting, right? And, like, Kramer has his car. And then it,
right,
like, yeah, it makes this noise that Jerry thinks is, like, the pistol that starts the race. And, like...
And everyone else does, too.
Yeah. And again, he gets his head start just like he did in high school, and he wins the race again.
And I love this whole time they're playing the Superman theme from the John Williams movie.
They're playing the Superman theme.
There's like this slow-mo moment where Jerry wins, and like, you think he's gonna like hug Elaine, but instead he like moves his arm right past her, knocks her upside the head, and goes to hug Lois instead.
Yeah.
Such good like physical acting from Julia Louis-Dreyfus there. Oh, it's perfect. My number 3 for season 6 is the Mom and Pop Store, which you might not know that episode just from the title because it feels like a smaller part of the episode, but this is the one where George buys what he thinks is the actor Jon Voight.
Yeah.
He thinks he bought his former car, and he's really proud of that. He gets a LeBaron. And he goes throughout the whole episode trying to prove that Jon Voight owns this car, even trying to see if he can compare, like, teeth marks on a pencil that was inside the car to dentists and teeth marks that end up on Kramer's arm, because Kramer actually sees Jon Voight.
Yeah.
And he goes, hey, I gotta talk to you. And Jon Voight, because he's a celebrity and he doesn't want to talk to random strangers, he just fucking grabs Kramer's arm and fucking bites it.
Yeah.
This is actually the first episode with Tim Whatley, which is Bryan Cranston, who played Walter White in Breaking Bad, which, by the way, I'm watching Better Call Saul's final season right now. I could talk about those shows too. But I knew Bryan Cranston way before Malcolm in the Middle, well before Breaking Bad, and I knew him as Tim Whatley in Seinfeld, and he's fantastic in this show. And I love that he didn't invite Jerry to his party, and Jerry is like very much trying to get in just because he has a toothache and he has to talk to one of the dentists in order to see if they can fix his toothache.
Yeah.
And he ends up knocking over this trophy, which pops a fucking Woody Woodpecker balloon.
Yeah.
Hey, who invited you anyway? You're a troublemaker. Ha 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 ha. But the other part that I love about that episode is Elaine, because she ends up getting like just drowned out by loud noises, and she loses her hearing. And she goes to Tim Whatley, who she has a crush on and wants to hook up with. She wants to be with Tim Whatley, but she can't understand a single thing that he's saying when she gets to the party. So he makes a gesture where like he grabs a bowl of peanuts and he kind of like lifts it towards her as he goes like, "Hey, do you want to go out Friday?" And Elaine goes, No.
No.
Tim just storms off. "Gee, thanks." Walks off. Perfect comedy setup. I love how that's told. It's so good. The mom and pop store. Fantastic episode.
So my number 3 was the big salad.
You had to get the big salad.
So basically, Elaine wants big salad. So George offers to buy the big salad. So, like, it turns out that, like, George's girlfriend at the time hands Elaine the salad. And then Elaine says thank you to her. But George gets mad because technically he was the one who bought the salad, so he should be thanked. And that's a whole thing because Elaine gets mad at George for making something so trivial. I just like how, again, George is just such a trivial character that, of course, he would, like, get mad over this one simple thing.
And it's a delicate balancing act, right? Because, like, you could easily make that character really annoying and really unsufferable. Where, because that's how I feel about Sheldon Cooper sometimes from The Big Bang Theory.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, I know it's supposed to be funny. I know that he's supposed to be obnoxious, but there are times when I'm watching that show, I'm just like, oh my God, shut the fuck up. I hate you. Get off my TV.
You mean you don't want to play D&D, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Game of Thrones?
But jingles.
But dooga. But doo-doo.
But jangles.
Ba-ba-ba.
Babaka. Buzanga.
Bazunga.
Ay, my bazungas. But,
yeah. This is a crazy Kramer, like, plotline. But Kramer plays golf with, like, this, guy who used to be, like, a professional athlete and stuff.
Oh, this is Joel Rifkin.
But, like, they're playing golf together, right? There's an altercation that happens. And, like, they kind of, you know, get into, like, this fight while they're playing golf. So then what happens is that this guy murders someone.
Really?
Yeah, he murders someone the same day that, like, you know, they're playing golf. And then Kramer's paranoid because he thinks that, like, you know, oh shit, like, what if, like, what happened earlier was the cause for him being so angry that he had to take it out on someone and actually murder this guy. Because this is, like, the mid-90s, of course they parody, like, the whole O.J. Simpson, highway chase.
Yeah. This is Cosmo Kramer. You know who I am, damn it!
Yeah. There are lots of things trivial about it, but at the same time you have this really, like, unexpected storyline of, like, oh, by the way, this guy that you played golf with, he murdered someone. I'm just like, yeah, this show goes from 0 to 100 real quick. That's what I like about it.
It's pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
My number 2 episode for season 6 is The Soup.
Oh, that is my number 1 episode.
Hell yeah.
I love The Soup.
This is an episode where Jerry meets up with Kenny Bania, a comedian he does not like. He hates him. He hates his material. He just does not get along with this guy at all. But Kenny Bania gives him a free suit, a free Armani suit. And he's not asking for anything. He doesn't want anything. All he has to do is get him a meal. Let's just have a meal sometime. So Jerry hates this. He's like, oh, fuck, fine. And they get a meal, and Bania orders the soup. He gets a soup, but he doesn't consider it a meal.
No.
And so he thinks this doesn't count.
No.
He's like, what do you mean? The soup is the meal. It's what you ordered. The act of going out into a restaurant is the meal.
And I'm with Jerry. I'm with Jerry on this. They went out to eat. You order a soup. I've done this before where, like, I've gone out to restaurants and I've just ordered, like, a bowl of soup.
Yeah.
It is the act of going out and getting food. That is a whole social event, so therefore, it is a meal.
It's just, I love that there's a lot of episodes where Jerry's putting up with people he really doesn't want to put up with.
Yeah.
It happens in season 1. It happens at the movies in season 4. There's like a pool guy later that he also just doesn't want to be friends with. I love it that this keeps happening to him, and it's just like, good lord, man. Good
Hey,
lord.
he does this to himself.
He does.
Like, he shouldn't have to put up with these people, but he does.
Is it really so bad to hang out with Kenny Banya for like 2 or 3 hours, Jerry? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, this episode's gold. It's gold, Jerry.
It's so gold. My number 2 was The Beard.
Oh.
Elaine has this, like, partner, but he's, like, gay.
Yeah.
And he's trying to, like, she likes him, but he's gay, but she's trying to figure out how to convert him back to heterosexuality and trying to make him straight. Like, I just thought that was so ridiculous. And I think, like, that's why I had this up, like, so high on my list, because the plot points here are just ridiculous. Like, with Jerry, he's trying to say that, like, oh, I've never seen Melrose Place. Oh,
yeah, is it this episode?
It's
oh,
this
that's
episode.
Pretty funny.
Yeah, the whole Melrose Place thing is ridiculous. Like, and eventually he takes, like, this lie detector where they're asking him stuff that happens in the show. And it's the quote. It is one of my favorite quotes in the whole show is in this episode. Not a lie, if you believe it.
It's not a lie, if you believe it.
Which I think is a nice quote for life, for better or worse. Eventually, Jerry just breaks and he starts, like, you know, voicing his opinions on what happens in the show, and he's so passionate about it, and yeah, obviously, you know, he was lying. We all have that TV show that, like, we don't want to admit we watch, but we actually watch. Like in high school. Everyone watched Jersey Shore in high school, and I guess I was trying to, like, be one of those, like, uptight, kids where I'm like, well, I don't mess with anything on, like, those shows, you know?
Yeah.
But that was me being, like, a very trivial 14-year-old. I love the Jersey Shore. I love that show. It is so trashy. It is so ridiculous, but I fucking love that show growing up. I would tune into the premieres every single week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, like, I'm a reality TV junkie, so, like, you know, yeah, I could relate to Jerry too well in this, so, yeah, that's why The Beard is my second favorite episode of the 6th season.
Nice. Which takes me to my favorite episode of season 6, which would be The Couch.
Oh, that is a good one. It made my preliminary list. But again, just, there's so many episodes, and it just didn't make the cut.
I think it's great for the podcast. We haven't had that many matches, honestly. I think it's, like, really cool. But in this episode's about abortion.
Yeah. Gosh.
This is, like, the most political this show ever gets. Where Elaine is obviously for abortion, and she has to deal with some scrupulous characters who are not for abortion, including Poppy, who's returning from the pie episode. They go back to his restaurant now that he's finally tightened up his health and safety. He's finally washing his hands now.
Yeah.
Which, again, ties back into season 1 as well, because in this episode, Kramer wants to build his own pie. He wants to make his own pie. And they actually do a pretty clever way of integrating that with the abortion plot line, because it's like, Elaine makes a big scene about, like, Poppy not being pro-abortion, because he's always freaking out about it. My mother, she came over from Germany, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And she's so into this guy, she's so into this boyfriend that she really, really, really likes. And then Jerry's like, well, what's his stance on abortion?
On abortion.
And sure enough, he's anti-abortion. And she's like,
Yep.
no.
Yep.
But Kramer is making a pizza, and he's just like, I'm going to add some cucumbers to this. And he's like, whoa, what are you doing? You don't add cucumbers to a pizza. What do you mean? I want to make my own pie. That's not how you make the pie. It's my pie. I can do whatever the hell I want with it. It's my restaurant, my choice. They're just making it a complete abortion analog with how you make your pie. And again, I just think that is such a clever way of writing things. It's so fucking funny. And also, the thing that's like unbelievable about this episode is that Jerry gets a new couch, and then a Poppy shows up to his apartment as sort of a reconciliatory, like, oh, sorry, we made a big scene in the restaurant. Sits on the couch, and he's just like, ah. Kramer asks, like, you really tired, Poppy? He goes, no. Gets up, leaves. Jerry looks. There's a fucking puddle on his couch. Poppy peed on my sofa. Fucking brilliant.
So good.
Favorite episode of season 6. I think that episode's hilarious. So.
And like I said before, The Soup was my favorite episode of season 6. And yeah, that's season 6.
Awesome possum. So this takes us to season 7, which is a very substantial season for me because this is when George decides that his life has no direction and he wants to change it up. And he decides he wants to marry Susan from season 4. And so this is the season where George gets engaged and he is now about to get married for the majority of this season.
This season is my favorite season of the whole show.
Damn.
It was so hard to like choose 5 episodes.
I actually agree with that. I had a hard time narrowing down my top 5.
Yeah, my number 1 was obvious because my number 1 episode of season 7 is also my favorite episode of the entire show. But like 2 through 5, oh my gosh, that was so hard. But I have my list, and we can finally discuss this.
Okay. Well, number 5 for me is The Invitations, which is the season finale of the season.
Oh my gosh, that is my number 5.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, that was number 5 for me.
This is a fucking banger season finale, and I love how it wraps up everything about this season because, again, like in season 4, George is enamored with Susan at first and he thinks he wants this, but then as it goes on he realizes he's made a big mistake and he just doesn't want to do this. The whole season he is just lamenting the fact that he's getting married. He doesn't want to get married, but he doesn't want to just outright end it because he's afraid of that for some reason.
Yeah.
He decides to come up with a whole bunch of schemes in this episode in order to get out of this arrangement, which is fucking never make me stop laughing. Every one of these attempts makes me laugh without fail. Because first, he starts smoking.
And he's not a smoker.
Yeah.
And we try smoking the cigarette. He's like yakking on it. He's like, of course I'm a smoker.
I've always smoked. I've never seen you smoke. Yeah, well, I quit smoking, but I'm just too addicted. I can't stop now.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so fucking good. But then the second part is like, make her sign a prenup. Make her sign a prenup. Elaine, would you sign a prenup? I wouldn't sign a prenup. Oh. So George goes to Susan. He's just like, before we go on with this wedding, though, I really need you to sign a prenuptial agreement. And she just starts laughing like, I make more than you do. Yeah, give me the paper. I'll sign it.
Yeah.
Earlier in the episode, George was very cheap because they're getting wedding invitation envelopes, and he picks the cheapest in the book. He goes all the way to the end of the book just so he doesn't have to spend too much money on invitations. And the whole time, Susan is licking these envelopes, trying to mail them out. And then she just falls over. So George takes her to the hospital, and the doctor informs her that, I'm sorry, but she's expired.
I remember just seeing that, and I was laughing my ass off. Because I'm like, of course she's dead. Of course, this is how the engagement breaks off. Because, like, I was reading that, like, apparently, like, the reactions to this finale were pretty polarizing.
Oh yeah.
Because people thought that was too cruel for Susan. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who like Susan's character, and I'm one of them. I loved Susan. I thought
Same.
she was hilarious in this show, and I thought she was a great foil for George, but fuck, I love that macabre humor. Fuck, I love that dark, twisted sensibility. And when it was revealed that she died and said she's dead, I was just like, oh my god. And I'm just laughing at George's reactions, where instead of, like, breaking down in tears, he's just sort of like, huh. Like, so she's dead. Yes, she's dead.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, she's dead.
Okay. There's a part where, like, Jerry's like, so I guess that means you're not getting married. And George just goes, like, he's just so happy.
I know.
He's so happy that she's dead.
And then there's, like, there's a subplot, like, earlier in the season where George goes out with, like, Marissa Tomei. And, like,
right.
He calls her at the end of the episode because Susan's dead. And she just hangs up on him.
Oh, I forgot about that, because I don't have that episode on my list. But yeah. Him wanting to hook up with Marissa Tomei is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
She loves short, stocky, bald guys.
That episode was great. Another point of overlap for me and Clement. And yeah.
Loved it.
Let's go on to number 4.
My number 4 is the calzone.
Ooh, that is not on my list.
George manages to bring this calzone from this one restaurant he went to, and it turns out that George Steinbrenner loves calzones, and so now he's getting more office time with the boss of the Yankees, and he's keeping him nice and happy, and he's taking all of his ideas. But George has this thing where, like, he keeps tipping the calzone guy, but the calzone clerk never notices that he tips him.
Yeah.
So one time he drops like a $10 bill or something, and the guy's still turned away, and he's like, ah. So he goes to reach back into the jar to grab the $10 bill, and the guy sees that, of course.
Yeah.
And he kicks George out of the store for life for trying to steal from the tip jar, which is like, oh my god.
Yeah.
And he keeps trying to devise schemes where, like, he'll get Newman to pick up the calzones, and when that falls apart, he goes to get Kramer to pick up the calzones, who simultaneously has been cooking his clothing because he likes how hot it is when it comes out of the oven, because that's the kind of guy Kramer is.
Yeah.
And he's got bundles and bundles of change that he thinks he can pay things for. So he goes to the calzone and he tries to pay for, like, a $15 food with pennies. Which I couldn't fucking imagine.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh my god.
God.
I love that episode. It's just so fucking goofy. And yeah, it's great.
My number 4 pick was The Rye.
That's on my list as well.
So, George's parents finally meet Susan's parents. And, like, there's this piece of rye bread. Marble rye bread, more specifically, I remember now. But Frank brings this piece of bread to the dinner. Dinner kind of doesn't really go the way that, like, they wanted it to. So what happens is that Frank takes, like, the bread back. And then when George realizes this, he's like, oh my goodness, I have to, like, replace the bread. So he's trying to find a way to, like, get this bread replaced back into, like, the house. And I think it's so funny because he, like, uses, like, what, a fishing rod or something?
Yeah, he uses a fishing rod. Oh, but there's so much to that, even. Just that final scene, everything culminates with that, because this whole time Kramer's been taking over for a stagecoach so that he can, like, ride the horses and ride people around New York.
Yeah.
But he also won, like, a lifetime supply of beefarino. And he's trying to get rid of it because he doesn't want to keep eating it, and he starts giving it to the horse, which only makes him gassy and start farting every time it walks around.
Yeah.
So he tries to take the Rosses out, but because it's just filled with beefarino, it stinks up the place and cuts the trip short. Meanwhile, Jerry has to pick up the marble rye, but there's only one left, and it gets picked up by this elderly old lady, Mrs. Choate.
Yeah.
And so he just makes so many fucking offers, like, okay, come on, lady, $50. I'll give you $50 for a $5 rye. You can't reject that offer. She goes, oh yeah? Watch me. So Jerry, complete desperation mode. He has no option. There's nothing he can do. He fucking mugs the old lady and steals the marble rye.
And he's just running with the bread with the old lady. And that was just so funny to me.
Shut up, you old bag.
And then there's like another testament to how great the writing is that there's another side plot with Elaine because she's dating like the saxophone guy. But the problem is that like he doesn't give her oral. They don't say that he doesn't give her oral, but they, again, they write around it. Yeah. And I thought that was super clever.
But it's such a dirty joke for a sitcom that's on primetime TV because it's like he finally gives in and he performs Cunnilingus on Elaine.
Yeah.
And then he goes to perform in the band, but he's just so dehydrated and there's just no moisture there. And he's just horrible at saxophone now. It's such a fucking weird sex joke for that show.
I know. It was really funny. There's just, obviously, there's like a lot of really good plot lines here. So, yeah, The Rye is definitely one of my favorites.
Nice. My number 3 is The Soup Nazi.
Oh, yeah, that's on my list.
I think anyone who's ever had a passing mention of Seinfeld probably knows about this episode because it's a very eccentric character that shows up in a lot of the advertisements and stuff. But the characters love getting soup at this one delicatessen that's run by a very strict man who they call the Soup Nazi. So they have to have like very specific, very strict, like walk in single form, walk to this part of the store, don't ask for bread if you don't get bread. George finds out the hard way that if you ask for bread, you are charged $3, and if you simply ask, what? No soup for you.
No soup for you.
Takes the soup back, and that's that. This is also the episode where we meet Cedric and Bob.
Yes! I love Cedric and Bob. They are my favorite side characters in the whole show. I wish they had more appearances, though. We'll get into that,
it's just so fucking random. It's like, okay, Elaine has an armoire that she wants to bring home, but she can't look over it right now, so she gets Kramer to look over the armoire. But all of a sudden, these two guys, Cedric and Bob, show up, and they're just like, oh, this is such a beautiful armoire. Come on, pick it up, let's take it home. And Kramer's just like, hey, what are you doing? This is my friends, I'm watching over this. He's like, wait, what are you doing? Are you talking to me? We are taking this armoire. There's nothing you can do about it. We're taking it, and that's that. And they just bully Kramer, and Kramer's just like, oh, okay. He just lets them take the armoire.
And like Kramer is so like mentally scarred by this. Like they come back in later episodes.
Yeah.
And it's so funny to me that like Kramer, it feels legit threatened by these guys. When you see him be so eccentric and so extreme in previous episodes, it's these two, Cedric and Bob, that just scare Kramer. And I think that's really funny.
So it's a good episode. I also like how Jerry sells out his girlfriend.
Oh, yeah.
This is schmoopy. This is the schmoopy episode.
Yes, it is the schmoopy episode.
They're doing fucking pillow talk, cutesy couple talk in the line, and Jerry's like, no, stop it. You have to take the Soup Nazi seriously. And because she's too busy doing the schmoopy, she gets in trouble with the Soup Nazi, and Jerry disavows knowing her. Do I know you?
Yeah, because he wants the soup and stuff. A bit of a spoiler, but this is actually my number 1 episode of season 7, and this is actually my favorite episode of the whole show.
The whole show? Goddamn.
The whole show. Because there's just so many good bits here. There's the schmoopy, there's Kramer, there's Elaine. It's so perfect. Like, I have no complaints about this episode. The pacing is fantastic. I just think that, like, if you want to know what Seinfeld is, and if I had to give you one episode that basically epitomizes the entire show, it would have to be this one. Because there's, like, the silliness of mundane stuff, there's the wackiness of, like, the side characters, and it's just a really funny episode. I was laughing so much to the point of tears when I was watching it, so, yeah, that's a great number 3.
Thank you. What's your number 3?
My number 3 was the secret code.
Yeah.
We basically find out that George doesn't really want to, like, share his ATM code.
With Susan, specifically.
With Susan, yes. And this causes, like, an argument between them.
So Jerry and George were roped into going to Elaine's dinner with Jay Peterman. We haven't even talked about Peterman yet, but
I know.
Because now Elaine's working for the Jay Peterman catalog, and they're all supposed to go out to dinner. But Elaine manages to bail on her own dinner so that only Jerry and George go to meet Mr. Peterman. But then Jerry comes up with an excuse to get out of it, leaving George alone with Peterman. And Peterman won't stop talking, and he won't let George go home. He just tags him along. He just brings him along on all of his zany adventures.
Oh yeah, and then his mom is, like, dying. Yes, his mom is dying.
Well, she wasn't dying. She was, like, sleeping or something.
Yeah.
And George figured, oh, wow, this will be the perfect opportunity to finally say what my password is, which is Bosco.
Yeah. Like the chocolate syrup Bosco.
And then she wakes up, Bosco. And then she dies.
Yeah, she dies there. I just thought that was so ridiculous. I'm like, what?
But, like, the great thing is, like, again, all the storylines converge, because there's a lot going on in this episode where, like, Kramer thinks the fire department is doing a shitty job, like, saving the city from fires. And Jerry's got this business deal with this guy named Leapin' Larry, who...
Leapin' Larry.
He happens to have a sleepy leg when he shows up, and he keeps trying to, like, wake his leg up, and he accidentally knocks over, like, some gasoline or something on top of, like, a whole bunch of electric outlets, which causes a fire. So a fire happens. Kramer's riding the fire truck because he's visiting the fire department, and he's making all kinds of mayhem happen there. And because of the fire that Jerry started, there's a guy trapped at an ATM machine, and the only way to get out of it is to insert a card and put in a password. So George has to reveal Bosco to the entire crowd and Jay Peterman, who thinks that Bosco is related to his mother's death. So...
And then Susan finds out his code and makes fun of him. It's even, like, kind of, again, going into the dark humor too, going back to, like, Jerry's, like, you know, sleeping leg for a bit. Leapin' Larry actually thinks that, like, Jerry's making fun of him because of his limp, and I'm like, wow, that's fucked up. Well, in reality, really, it's just Jerry's leg fell asleep and he's limping.
I love that as soon as he's just walking around with his leg, all the coworkers are just like, ha, that's a funny impression. I'm like, what the hell?
I know, like, damn.
My number 2 episode is The Hot Tub.
Ooh, that was so close. That was, like, number 6. If I had to give it a number 6, it'd be The Hot Tub.
I like this episode because it's about this guy named Jean-Paul who's visiting Elaine, and he's supposed to be doing a marathon. And everyone is just so stressed out and tense about him making sure that he wakes up because he overslept the last important thing he was racing in. And they don't want him to oversleep. But Elaine just keeps screwing things up. She's being a klutz this episode. And so, like, Jerry decides that, no, John Paul, you're going to stay with me. You're going to stay with me. But Kramer he put in a hot tub in his fucking apartment. This son of a bitch is ice cold. And he fucking blows the power out, manages to fucking short circuit all of it. Well, first off, they were staying at a hotel and trying to get, like, the wake-up service to wake up Jean-Paul, but then Jerry felt like he pissed off the wake-up guy because he's, like, too adamant that you gotta wake him up. I know, sir. No, you just, all right. And he's so paranoid that he's pissed off the wake-up guy. He's just like, we gotta go back home.
Yeah.
And then fucking... the hot tub blows the electricity in the building.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Again with the overlap.
And it tops off where they do make the marathon, and John Paul's running the marathon. But then Kramer, because he's so cold for sleeping in a hot tub, he's like suffering temperature-wise that he's drinking hot coffee in, like, July.
Yeah.
He's drinking hot coffee, and because it's a marathon, John Paul reaches out for a drink.
Yeah.
And he gets the hot coffee and burns his fucking mouth.
God.
Fucking love that episode.
That's so funny. My number 2 was the sponge.
Oh, yeah.
I've gotten a really good quote out of that for daily usage. Like, this is sponge-worthy. You're sponge-worthy. So basically, Elaine has a really specific type of birth control that she uses, and like, it's a sponge. It's the sponge, you know? Like, it's a contraceptive sponge that you kind of just shove up, and like, you know, that's used for birth control and stuff like that. So, unfortunately, the sponge is being, like, discontinued or something. And she's so insistent on using this specific type of birth control instead of others that, like, she finally finds a pharmacy that's selling these sponges. And, like, at first she goes from having 1 sponge to 3 sponges, and then she eventually just buys the whole case of sponges. There's about 50 of them in there or something. And I just thought that was really funny.
My dumb anecdote about that episode. So, like, when I watched that episode as a kid in the 90s, I didn't know what was going on with George and the condom. I didn't understand why it was too late. Because, like, there's another episode earlier where Kramer buys, like, a whole bag of condoms, and he gives them to George. But George, he finds out later, like, oh, by the way, those bag of condoms, George, don't use them. They were expired. And so there's, like, a worry that, like, maybe George might be a father in that episode, but it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then this episode comes along, and they cut a hard cut to Susan and George. They're in the middle of sex, and he's trying to open the condom wrapper, but he's taking forever, and he can't do it. He's like, it's like a bag of peanuts. You gotta rip it open, you know? And then he stops, and he just goes, it's too late. And as a kid, I thought it's because, do condoms expire really quickly? Because I didn't know how condoms worked or what their purpose was in sex. I didn't understand. Yeah. I was young. I was like 8 or 9 years old. And it's only as an adult I realized, he has an erection, but his erection went away.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Yeah. Probably has my favorite scene in the whole show, too.
Oh?
So it's Kramer and the AIDS walk.
Oh, this is the AIDS walk episode.
This is the AIDS walk episode. So, like, Kramer does this AIDS walk, and he's registering for it. And they're asking him to wear the AIDS ribbon, because that's how you signify support for the AIDS cause, and Kramer just doesn't wear it. So then he's on this walk, and everyone's like, wait a minute, where's your ribbon? And then Kramer's like, I don't gotta wear it. And everyone's like, put the ribbon on. Why aren't you wearing the ribbon? That's a problem. And this one guy's like, Cedric, Bob, this guy won't wear a ribbon. And it's the same guys who got the armoire in the Soup Nazi episode. And they're like,
who doesn't want to wear the ribbon?
And so later, they all confront Kramer in, like, this alley, and Kramer's like, I'm not gonna wear this ribbon. And then Cedric and Bob are like, but I'm wearing a ribbon, he's wearing a ribbon, we are all wearing a ribbon, so why aren't you going to put on a ribbon? And then Kramer's like, this is America, I don't gotta wear anything I don't want to wear. And then they're like, fine, then I guess we'll have to teach you how to put on the ribbon. And then they just, like, grab him, and I guess, like, they just attack him in the alley. And then at the end of the episode, the gang make it out to the walk, and then they see Kramer just all exhausted and beaten up, and Jerry thinks it's because Kramer was just really tired and didn't sleep the night before.
I also love before he actually goes on the walk, it's like, he refuses to wear the ribbon at the sign up, and she's like, well, you gotta wear the AIDS ribbon. And he goes, you know what?
Yeah.
You're a ribbon bully.
Yeah.
Like a ribbon bully. All right.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that scene is really applicable to a lot of things today.
Yeah.
Like how some people won't wear a mask.
Basically.
Mm-hmm.
Who doesn't want to wear the mask? We're all getting the vaccine. I have the vaccine, so why aren't you getting the vaccine? But yeah, and my number one episode of season 7, we don't need to go into it because it is The Rye.
Awesome. And you know my number one is the Soup Nazi, so yeah. We good with season 7. I loved it. It's such a good season.
It's fucking fantastic.
Very, very great. And you know, like, I didn't realize this, but like, apparently the guy who played Cedric passed away last year, so.
Oh no!
That's sad. Yeah, he passed away.
Aww.
I was trying to look at what like other things Cedric and Bob did in other shows, and I found out that Cedric died. So rest in peace to him. Yeah.
On that cheery note, let's move on to season 8. And I think this is when the series starts to get a little bit cartoony, but like not in a bad way, just in that the plot lines get so ridiculous and so goofy and so silly. But it doesn't matter to me because it may not have that grounded, like, natural realism of seasons 2, 3, and 4, but it's still funny. It's still really funny, hilarious, and it's still a show that I'm fine with watching and sitting down with. So like it's a little more cartoony, but it doesn't bother me because it's still a good show.
For sure.
Season 8, Elaine takes over for Jay Peterman, and actually she is the president of the company. She's actually the one in charge because Jay Peterman goes off to the jungles of Burma and he goes insane.
Yeah.
So Elaine is now president, CEO of the Jay Peterman catalog, but you know. Otherwise, season 8 is goofy. And number 5 on my list is The English Patient.
That is also number 5 on my list.
Nice. Sweet. We're really good at matching number 5.
Apparently so. But I have The English Patient bolded, so yeah, I like this episode a lot.
This episode, I mean, you ever had that frustration where you just don't like a movie or a game that everyone else likes?
Yep.
Because that's what Elaine has with The English Patient, where it's like this Oscar-nominated movie, you know, it's real, like it's not made up for the show, it's a real thing, and everyone loves it. Everyone thinks it's the best movie, except for Elaine, who keeps getting roped into watching this movie.
Yep.
To the point where Jay Peterman takes her one final time, and she's like, Elaine, are you not liking the movie? I hate it! But this is also the episode with the Mandelbaums, and I love the Mandelbaums. Jerry is visiting his dad in Florida, and he gets introduced to Izzy Mandelbaum, who is this really old, competitive guy who's always trying to be better than other people. He thinks he's like a big muscle builder kind of guy. And he's like, you think you are the number one dad?
Yeah.
Tries lifting weights, injures himself. All of a sudden, the son comes, and the son is barely younger than his dad. He looks just as old as his dad does. Tries lifting a TV, breaks his back.
Yeah.
They're both in the hospital. Jerry's trying to take care of him. All of a sudden, this older guy comes in. My son, my dad, my grandpa. Oh, come on. What happened to him? He's trying to lift the TV. This old thing? Oh boy, it's go time. All three of them end up in the hospital.
There's also the plot point of Kramer's cigars.
Oh, the Cubans.
Yeah, the Cubans are in this episode.
They get like fired from their job for rolling the crepes too tightly.
Yes, the crepes.
Which end up burning other George. Mr. Peanut, as I call him. I admire your skills, Mr. Peanut. My number 4 episode is the Susie.
I like the Susie. It's not on my list, but I like the Susie.
In this episode, there's a coworker of Elaine's who does not know that her name is Elaine and keeps calling her Susie. And it gets so ridiculous that Elaine has to invent Susie to take care of work that she doesn't want to do, but then it gets too overblown so that she has to pretend that Susie has died. And everyone in the office is so oblivious to the fact they have never actually met a Susie that they hold a funeral for a person who doesn't exist. Yeah. That's what I mean by saying season 8's a little more cartoony than others. And the other thing is that Jerry ends up like tormenting this one guy by accidentally slamming his trunk on his thumbs and breaking his thumbs. And then he ends up getting locked into the trunk where they overhear Jerry and Elaine talking about killing Susie. Susie didn't have an accident. She was murdered by Jerry Seinfeld. Not only that, but I broke his thumbs.
Yeah.
Fuck, I love that episode.
I know. This is also the episode where one of my favorite Seinfeld jokes is in. The side plot with George is that Steinbrenner is hosting like a ball. And he's super excited about it because he thinks it's a great chance to have like this really big entrance with his girlfriend at the time. Unfortunately, his girlfriend tells George that they need to talk. And George thinks that, like, you know, because of that phrase, they're gonna break up, so he's trying to avoid her. So then we get this scene where George is sitting in front of, like, the answering machine, and you hear his voicemail.
Believe it or not, George isn't at home. Please leave a message at the beep. I must be out, or I'd pick up the phone. Where could I be? Believe it or not, I'm not home. Fucking brilliant.
And I was reading the behind the scenes of this particular, like, scene. And apparently it took Jason Alexander so many tries to nail this voicemail because he's actually like a Broadway singer. So the way he was singing it was too good and they wanted him to intentionally sing bad. But it was just so hard for him to do that they had to keep retaking that scene over and over and over again.
Brilliant episode. Love the Susie.
Mm-hmm. My number 4 was The Comeback.
It's not on my list, but I like that episode.
George, in his self-obsessive ways, is, like, trying to, like, deliver this retort back. Because, like, the line was, the ocean called, you had too many shrimp.
Yeah.
He finally thinks of a comeback, and he's like, the jerk store called and they're running out of you. But everyone is like, what?
It's just, there is no jerk store. It doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense.
But he pushes through anyway, because he doesn't care. He thinks this is the best zinger he's ever had. And he gets to the guy and he goes, so the jerk store called and they're running out of you. And he goes, what's the difference? You're their number 1 client.
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, I had sex with your wife.
It was just a really good George episode for me, so.
Yeah. Pretty good, it's pretty good. My number 3 is The Chicken Roaster.
That is my number 1.
Nice.
But I love The Chicken Roaster.
So this episode, a Kenny Rogers chicken place opens up across the street from Seinfeld's apartment, but it's beaming a gigantic red light into Kramer's house. And again, you've probably seen the meme recently because this has been a gigantic meme on the internet all year.
Yeah.
You open the door into Kramer's apartment and it's just red. It's just pure red. And he can't live like this. He can't sleep like this. So he wants to switch apartments with Jerry until he can put Kenny Rogers out of business. And there's like this dynamic shift where like Jerry starts becoming more like Kramer and he's like entering his own apartment like Kramer. Yeah. And he becomes friends with Bob Sacamano.
Yeah.
And Kramer's become addicted to the chicken, so now he doesn't want to put Kenny Rogers out of business.
Yeah.
I love when Jerry's like sleeping in Kramer's apartment and he just hears all these creaking and cracking, all these noises going on, and like he's got a ventriloquist dummy.
Yeah, Mr. Marbles.
He's got this dummy named Mr. Marbles. No wonder Kramer is the way he is. He lives in a fucking madhouse.
And I just love the consistency with the show again, because the red light stays on for the entire episode. Like, whenever you go into, like, Jerry's apartment and just open the door, you see the red light, because that's the restaurant. It's just so funny. And, like, I memed a part of this episode, because at the end, where the light goes off and stuff and the restaurant has to be shut down, Kramer puts up a sign that says, "Can he come back?" Which is a change from the banner that he hangs up earlier in the episode where it says "Bad Chicken," because he wants to get rid of this restaurant even though he hasn't tried the chicken yet. So I memed the Kenny come back sign because I made a Kenny Omega ship post a while ago. And I was like, me 6 months into Kenny Omega surgeries, and it's just the picture of Kramer holding up the sign that says Kenny come back.
Good shit. Good shit.
It is really good. I just thought that, like, it's very cartoony, but I think it's, like, the best kind of cartoony.
Especially the ending. The ending, Jerry goes back into his apartment and literally Mr. Marbles runs across the room. Like, you see his shadow and everything. That couldn't have been anything but an actual alive dummy coming to life. Unless Kramer is doing his ventriloquism act in his bedroom at night when he's trying to sleep, that fucking dummy came to life.
Oh, yeah. My number 3 episode is the Yada Yada.
Oh, that's a good one.
So, like, George has a new girlfriend, again, because it seems like with every episode they get new girlfriends and stuff.
Isn't it unrealistic as fuck that these characters have, like, so many dates every single week?
I know, it's ridiculous.
Like, for being a neurotic mess, George ends up with amazing women. Holy shit.
I know, it's wild. I'm like, what the fuck? What does he do?
Ironically, it's probably Kramer who had the least amount of girlfriends, because you barely saw him with any.
Oh, yeah. With this episode, he has a girlfriend, and she likes to say yada 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 to get to the point of things, which I do a lot too.
Yeah.
Like, yada yada yada, you get to the point. It turns out that George's new girlfriend had, like, her ex come over, and she's describing him, like, how the night went. And he's like, oh, he visited me, and yada, yada, yada. I'm just, out of it today. And so George suspects that they had sex, and she's using the yada, yada to cover it up. It gets even deeper, because it turns out that, like, his girlfriend is actually a fucking shoplifter. Like, she shoplifted, like, what? Like, different, like, handbags and clothes or something. Really expensive stuff. Yeah.
And that's the part she yada yada'd over.
Yeah, and use the yada yada to cover it up and stuff. So, yeah, that was one point. This is the plot where, the dentist converts to Judaism. And then Jerry thinks that he's using his Judaism as an excuse to make Jewish jokes. Because, of course, if he's Jewish, then he can make those jokes, right?
And this offends you as a Jewish person? No, it offends me as a comedian.
Yeah.
My number 2 is The Little Kicks.
Ooh,
this is
okay.
when Elaine, as head of the J. Peterman Company, starts a dance, and her dancing is awful.
Yeah.
Elaine does these weird little fucking kicks, and she's a fucking weirdo when she dances. And she becomes the pariah of the office. But she thinks that she's been badmouthed by George, and that's why they're making fun of her. And so she's warning, like, her employees, don't go near George. Don't you ever hang out with George. He's a bad seed. He's a bad apple. Which turns George into some kind of fucking rebel.
Yeah.
And he's, like, trying to score a date with this one employee of the office by pretending he's a badass.
Yeah.
And then the episode ends, he's trying to record a movie in the movie theater, because that's another plot line. Like, Jerry somehow gets roped into, like, bootleg filming, like, theaters and theater, like, did he film Rochelle?
Yeah.
But George gets arrested. He gets arrested for filming the movie. And then his dad shows up and, all right, what idiot put you up to this?
Yeah.
Why George isn't clever enough to come up with a scheme like this. You got that right. What the hell does that mean? That's like, if you've seen the behind the scenes features, that blooper, they screwed up that argument so many times. That was the
really?
hardest scene they've ever gotten through. Apparently, Jerry Stiller's hilarious in that scene. Because, like, every time he would go, what the hell does that mean? Like, Julia would just break down laughing because it was so ridiculous. Like, she's supposed to be fighting with George's dad, and it's like, he's just so over the top. Just, you want a piece of me? You got it! Love that episode. It's great.
Great episode. All right. My number 2 was the Bizarro Jerry.
Oh, yeah. That's
I
on my
love the
list as
Bizarro
well.
Journey. Like, I am a sucker for, like, quote-unquote alternate universes and stuff. Granted that, like, this doesn't really take place in an alternate universe. I'll explain more when you get to the plot. So basically, like,
Jerry Seinfeld and the Multiverse of Madness.
Jerry Seinfeld and the Multiverse of Madness. Oh my gosh. Like, if Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character from the MCU ever goes through the multiverse, there has to be, like, an Elaine reference. I'm telling you. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So, in this episode, Elaine has a boyfriend. They break up, but, you know, it's pretty, you know, civil. They decide to, like, remain friends. And Elaine finds that her ex is being so supportive, and she finds that he's a much better person and a better friend than Jerry. And Elaine's telling Jerry this, and she's like, well, in fact, it's like he's the complete opposite of you.
My Bizarro Superman.
Yep. So again, Jerry's love of Superman coming into play. He thinks that Elaine's ex is the Bizarro Jerry.
And he's right in more ways than one, because Bizarro Jerry has two friends. One of them is bald and has glasses, and his name is Gene. And he's a guy who gives money to the homeless, and he reads books. And he's also got a next door neighbor, Feldman, from across the hall. Feldman buys groceries for Bizarro Jerry and helps stock his fridge. And then there's the guy who works for the post office, Fargus. And Fargus and Bizarro Jerry are the best of friends.
Vargas actually works for FedEx.
Oh, right, FedEx, that's what it was. And they're the best of friends. They love each other. And Bizarro Jerry's apartment looks exactly like Jerry's, except it's backwards, and he has a fucking Bizarro figure.
Yeah. One of the running gags in Seinfeld is whenever someone comes up to Jerry's apartment, Elaine and George will, like, ring the doorbell, be like, hey, it's me, I'm coming up. But Kramer just barges in every single time, doesn't even knock on the door. So whenever Feldman, like, comes over to Bizarro Jerry's apartment, he'll knock on the door and he'll be like, it's me, Feldman, from across the hall. And then he'll just open the door. So that's really funny.
I just love he always says that. He says that twice in the episode. I just love the idea of every single day, no matter how many years they've known each other, it's Feldman from across the hall. I love that moment where they all meet up in the street. And Elaine has to choose between her old friends and her new friends. Yeah. And she's looking back and, like, they're paying the homeless. They're, you know.
It's Sonic Generations.
Elaine, can I come too? I'm sorry, but we already have a George. That's my favorite episode of season 8. I think it's the funniest episode. I think it's just so goofy and so silly. I also love the plot of, like, Kramer takes up a job even though he never actually signed up or he never had an interview or anything. He just works at a job for no reason other than he thought it would be fun.
Yeah.
And then he gets brought in and questioned about his work, and he says, quite frankly, I don't know what the hell you're trying to do. Just trying to get ahead. Well, I'm sorry, but there's no way we can really keep you. I don't even really work here. That's what makes this so difficult.
Yeah.
It's a good episode.
It really is. Chicken Roaster was my number one, so...
There you go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which takes us to the final season of Seinfeld, season 9. I know we spent a lot longer talking about this series than I thought we would.
Yeah, it's okay though.
But we're at the end. We're at the final season. And again, I thought the show ended on a high note. I thought it was a good season. The finale is a little bit questionable. I don't have the finale in my top 5. I don't know if you have the finale in your top 5.
I have the finale in my top 5.
Okay. The only interesting thing of note for season 9 is that George ends up working for a steel cutting business, Mr. Kruger, because he's no longer at the Yankees. He left it in season 8, and he actually gets injured at the end of season 8. It was supposed to be the summer of George.
Yeah.
And I love the irony that, like, envelopes were what injured him. Mm-hmm. But season 9 is pretty much just that. You know, George is working at a steel worker's place, Elaine's still at Peterman's. Jerry's still Jerry. Jerry never really changes.
No.
But, yeah. My number 5 would be The Burning.
Ooh, that's not on my list. But The Burning is good.
The Burning is one where Kramer is working for this program at the hospital where he has to pretend that he is sick from something, and then they have to discover what it is. And he keeps getting gonorrhea, which pisses him off, because he got typecast into it. Like, your gonorrhea was so good, we want you to do it again. I got gonorrhea again. Goes to all of his friends. I've got gonorrhea.
Yeah.
But I love the Putty. Oh, Putty! I didn't even mention Putty!
Yeah,
Season
Putty.
9 is where Elaine has a steady boyfriend, and she stays with Putty, played by Patrick Warburton. And he is in through most of the season, and I wish he joined the cast way earlier because he is one of the best additions to the show. I kind of wish Elaine stayed with him for the whole show.
Yeah.
And Putty is amazing. And in this particular episode, Putty, it turns out, is religious. It turns out that he has a car with a Jesus fish on it, and he listens to religious stations. And this doesn't offend Elaine until he brings up the fact that, like, oh, it doesn't bother me that you're not religious, because I'm not the one going to hell. So one day, Elaine and Putty wake up, and Putty notices that the mail didn't come to Elaine, like the newspaper. But the person across the hall did get their paper, and so he suggests that she go grab it. And she goes, well, that belongs to the neighbor. And so, come on, get it. Oh, why don't you pick it up? Sorry, thou shalt not steal. Oh, but it's okay if I get it. Oh, you know where you're going.
Yeah.
David, I'm going to hell. It's the worst place in the world with devils and caves and all that ragged clothing. What do you think about that? It's going to be rough. I love that whole dynamic. I love that whole relationship, and just the idea of Putty being super religious. Putty's like the best character because he's always just like staring ahead when nothing's happening. He's just always sitting on the couch, just kind of looking ahead, even on the airplane when like the first scene we see in season 9. He's always just got this vacant stare, and he's just so funny. I don't know. He should have been in the show way longer than he was.
For sure. Like, I feel like he could have been like I think he's a great foil to like Elaine.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like if they shoehorned him in like some episodes earlier in the season, like he would have been like a even more beloved side character, you know?
Yeah. I love that they have this on-off relationship where they're constantly breaking up and getting back together, breaking up and getting back together.
Exactly, which would have been great for him because you could have shoehorned him like maybe in like the 3rd or 4th season, and he appears on and off because, you know, he just has that kind of dynamic with Elaine. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fucking great character. And The Burning, fantastic episode.
All right. My number 5 pick, again, we're getting into more cartoony stuff with Seinfeld, but my number 5 was The Merv Griffin Show.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just like Kramer to a big extreme. Like, so basically the setup for this episode is that Jerry and Kramer are walking around, and they find pieces of the set from the Merv Griffin Show in, like, the dumpster. And Kramer thinks this is, like, you know, a waste of, like, you know, pieces. Like, he thinks that they shouldn't be thrown away in the trash. So what he does is that he takes all of the pieces, and I don't know how he does this. I don't know what his apartment layout looks like that he could even do this, but he constructs the entire Merv Griffin Show in his apartment. And he's pretending that the show is, like, you know, live, and he's pretending that he's the host, and whenever someone comes to visit him, they're guests technically, and then he'll, like, interview him as a guest and stuff, you know?
Yeah. It's by far the most ridiculous thing Kramer's ever done. It's so fucking stupid. It's just like, he brings in an animal expert, even though he doesn't have cameras or anything, and he's just like, well, where are the cameras? It's like, why are you doing this? I love that episode for what George is going through, because George accidentally runs over a whole bunch of pigeons when he's driving around in his car. And then he's walking through the park, and he runs into a whole bunch of pigeons and kills them that way. We had a deal! Ah! It gets to the point where he drives around again, and he sees another flock of pigeons, and he knows he's gonna kill them, so he swerves out of the way, and he runs into a squirrel.
Yeah.
And so his girlfriend makes him fucking rehabilitate the squirrel and take him to a vet and own him and take care of him for the rest of its small life.
Yeah.
There's this great moment where they're in the vet and like the veterinarian's like, I'll give you 30 minutes to speak with the squirrel. And George gives him this look like, 30 minutes? What?
Yeah.
It's a fucking squirrel. Oh, that's great.
Jerry has a new girlfriend, and he notices that she has like an entire vintage toy collection that she inherited from like her father, I think.
Yeah.
And Jerry wants to play with these toys, but Celia finds those toys so sentimental that she's like, no, don't play with them. They're not yours to play. So basically, what ends up happening is that, like, Jerry basically tries to find ways to, make Celia not notice that, like, he's playing with these toys. So one of the things that he does is that, like, he gives her like a pain reliever of sorts, so that like it knocks her out so that he can play with the toys.
I love that he's looking at the two containers. It's like, may not. I'm sorry, it's just so funny to me.
Yeah.
He's looking at these two containers, and it's like, will not cause drowsiness, may cause drowsiness. Takes that one.
Yeah.
It's so fucked up when you think about, like, he is literally dating a woman and drugging her to incapacitate her every single night.
Yeah.
Like, he's doing this every night, not to do anything horrible. I mean, it's still horrible, but it's like, just so he could play with her fucking action figures and toys.
I know. It gets even worse because George wants to play with the toys too. So what ends up happening is that they all have dinner together, and they, like, give his girlfriend a fuck ton of turkey and wine. Because turkey has chemicals that makes you drowsy and fall asleep. So that makes her go to sleep, and then Jerry and George all play with the toys as well.
It's got tryptophan, I think.
Yeah, tryptophan.
My number 4 is The Frogger.
Oh, that is also my number 4.
Hey, we matched up again.
Yep.
Right
I
on.
love The Frogger. Mm-hmm.
The Frogger is just a goofy, fun episode. So, like, this old pizza place that Jerry and George used to go to is closing up, so they go for one last slice. And they notice that the arcade machine, Frogger, made by Konami, is still there. And George still has the top score. He was never dethroned. He is the master of Frogger. So he wants to buy the machine, but then he finds out, oh, you can't take it home without taking out the electricity. And when the electricity goes, the scores are going to go too. So he hires an electrician and he makes all this convoluted scheme to, like, get it from the pizza place to his apartment. And the ending is the payoff. The ending is the amazing moment where they don't have enough time. They've run out of energy and battery, and they got to get it across the street quickly. But there's traffic. So what do? I've been preparing for this my entire life. And they actually play the actual Frogger music as George slowly navigates the machine across the street. But it's Seinfeld, and unfortunately these characters can never be happy.
Nope.
A semi-truck comes out of nowhere, and it doesn't even hit the brakes or anything. It just fucking plows through the Frogger machine and destroys it.
It's so sad. Poor Frogger machine. Doesn't the game over music also play when it gets run over?
I think the death sound does.
Yeah, the death sound. That's what I meant.
And then Jerry goes, game over.
Yeah. There's another funny subplot in this episode where, like, Elaine is dealing with shenanigans at her job and stuff, and, like, she finds a slice of cake in the fridge and eats it, but it turns out that, like, it's a really old cake from, like, King Edward's marriage. I forget which King Edward it was, but the point is it's a really old cake, and I thought that was pretty funny.
I just love that Elaine had no self-control, because, like, she kind of fixes the cake at first.
Yeah.
And she's like, all right, now it's looking good. And then she starts eating, like, the frosting that she took off in order to make it look even.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, this is so good. I should have another piece. Oh, I mustn't. Ah, what the hell. Just starts eating the cake.
Another Nickelodeon stars in it, and I didn't even recognize him until, like, I saw him. But you see, like, a 10 or 11-year-old Drake Bell as the kid at the arcade machine.
It was Drake Bell in this episode. Oh my god.
Yeah, this was before he did the Amanda Show, before he did Drake and Josh and stuff. So, I found that fascinating.
Drake Bell played Frogger.
Drake Bell, played Frogger, is now banished to Mexico because of several assault charges.
What?
You never heard of this?
No?
Oh my god, so like, it was either last year or 2020, he, is involved in several sexual assault cases.
Oh my god.
Possible pedophilia, I forget exactly what the charges are.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's wild. It's so wild. Like,
wow.
He essentially fled to Mexico, and that's where he's been. He's been in Mexico this whole time, and he has a music career there. And it's so wild because, like, you know how his name is Drake Bell, right?
Yeah.
In Mexico, his performance name is Drake Campaña, and Campaña is the Spanish word for bell, and I'm like, are you serious?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
This is fucking insane.
You should read into it, it's crazy.
Well, I got it after this. Good lord.
Yeah. But, yeah, so that's where Drake Bell's been since this episode, and since Drake and Josh. Josh is fine, though. Like, Josh has been in Hollywood for a while, that's what he's doing.
I love how adamant you were to make sure. Josh is fine! Josh didn't do anything wrong!
Yeah. Josh has just been vibing. Anyway, what was your number 3 pick?
My number 3 is the Strawn Box.
Okay. That's not my number 3, but that's a good pick regardless.
This episode is about Kramer trying to hide a key in Jerry's apartment that is the key to his Strawn Box, which has a lot of his valuables in there. And Jerry keeps finding it because Kramer has the worst fucking hiding locations imaginable. Yeah, I'll put it with forks and spoons. You won't find it there. Meanwhile, Jerry's got this neighbor that he inadvertently keeps out of the building because there's been a lot of robberies at the apartment. And he makes an enemy out of this guy. And they just get off on the wrong foot, even though he lives 2 doors away from him. And Kramer decides to hide the key in there. However, it ends up in the bird's food dish, and the bird swallows the key, and he dies.
Yeah.
Jerry needs the cufflinks that Kramer took from him that are now in the Strawn Box, and the only way to get the cufflinks is to get the key, but the bird ate the key, and where's the bird? In a pet cemetery.
Yeah.
So they have to dig up the bird, and there's this amazing moment where he digs it up really quickly, and he goes, all right, Kramer, I dug up the bird. Now let's put this up and cut him open.
Yeah.
And the neighbor catches him. What's your number 3?
All right. My number 3 was the Puerto Rican Day.
Oh, that's a good pick.
It's a little kind of bottle-ish episode, kind of. So basically with this one, they're all coming back from, like, a baseball game. And, like, unfortunately, their drive home reroutes them through the Puerto Rican Day Parade. And so this whole episode revolves around, like, the gang trying to, like, avoid the parade and escape from it. And, of course, lots of things go wrong. And there are a lot of, like, really small jokes here and stuff. Like, there's like another driver that they kind of have, like, an issue with, because, like, apparently, like, the driver thinks that, like, you know, he blocked them off.
Jerry's just an absolute piece of shit with that one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I love he makes things up with Maroon Golf. That's what they call him.
Yeah.
He makes things up with Maroon Golf, and he's just like, oh, by the way, I take back what I said. I wasn't sorry at all. See you later, jackass. But then he gets quartered, and he's like, oh, I'm a jackass, am I?
Elaine decides to leave the car early in the episode, and she catches a taxi, but, like, the taxi also, like, gets caught in the traffic, and Elaine's like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna leave. But then every time she gets out of the taxi goes up further and further. Which is a really funny gag.
I love George's thing where he goes to the movie theater and he thinks he has this great zinger for this movie that he's already seen. He's just seeing it to make the zinger. It's kind of like the joke with the jerk store.
Mm-hmm.
So the blimp explodes and he goes, boom, that's gotta hurt. But no one laughs at it because they're too preoccupied with the laser guy, with the laser pen guy. Which, okay, that's the most unrealistic thing. I know this season's really cartoonish, but the idea that the audience would say, haha, the laser guy's really funny. Bullshit.
Uh-huh.
They would be just as annoyed as George is at this fuckhead who keeps shining things with a laser. But whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Goofy. That episode actually is no longer in reruns because there was a bit of a controversy when that episode came out.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of people took offense with the fact that at the end of the episode, Kramer is lighting a cigar and he throws the thing away and it lands on the Puerto Rican flag. And the Puerto Rican flag catches fire.
Yeah.
And he has to put it out. And there's this whole thing with Cedric and Bob who show
Yeah.
up.
I popped for them. I was like, Cedric and Bob!
I think it's a harmless joke. I think it's fine that like Kramer's just being an inept idiot. And he tried to put it out. Yeah. It's not like he wanted to do it. But I guess there was a controversy because people were like, well, they burned the Puerto Rican flag on Seinfeld this week. And it's like, well, it wasn't done out of ill intent or anything, but...
I still think that, like, what Chris Jericho did with the Brazilian flag is worse. Because he intentionally did that.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
So, that show is no longer in reruns because of that controversy. Like, it's on the DVDs, it's on Netflix, but you're not going to find it on TV. It's never been on TV since its initial airing. My number 2 is The Blood.
Ooh, good one.
Fuck, I love this episode. Kramer is trying to keep his blood in cooled containers, because you never know when you might need his blood, I guess. And Jerry has an accident with an X-Acto knife that pierces his throat, and he bleeds out, and... who is there to supply Jerry with blood but fucking Kramer? Mm-hmm. You got 12 pints of Kramer in you, buddy.
I love that.
Just the screaming he does is so good. Actually, I love when he slams the X-Acto knife and like Kramer goes, heads up! And they do that amazing camera cut of like Jerry going, ooh!
Yeah.
It gets much better when like the Mandelbaums come back and they have to like Jerry's trying to lose weight at the same time and they think that all the sausages in his apartment that Kramer and Newman made belong to Jerry.
Yeah.
Looks like a butcher shop in here. That's it, Butterbean. It's go time. And so they make him run with the car. But Kramer's blood is all over the car, so the fucking Mandelbaums freak out and drive fast, fucking making Jerry trip on himself and fucking get more injured. And whose blood saves Jerry this time? Fucking Newman.
Newman's blood. I don't think I've mentioned so far how much I love Newman. George is my favorite character on the show, but honestly, Newman's my second favorite.
Yeah, we haven't talked enough about Newman, really. He's so good in this show.
He's fucking amazing. I love Newman. He's, like, so cynical, but also really, like, peppy. And I just think that, like, his personality is really funny.
Yeah.
And he's a great foil to all the characters. It's also really funny that he, like, kind of has an unrequited thing with Elaine.
Yeah. Great character. Great character. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is the finale.
Ooh, alrighty. I guess we'll talk about the ending now, then.
Okay.
Ridiculous premise. So, like, the pilot that they made for NBC, Jerry, is back on, and they are given a private jet to fly wherever they want. They can go wherever they want, and they choose to go to Paris. But Kramer got water in his ear when he went to the beach, and so he starts hopping around on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of turbulence from Kramer's hopping, and so they have to land in Lathan, Massachusetts. And there they spot a mugging where someone is being carjacked, and they're filming the whole thing, cracking jokes like, well, there goes the money for the lipo. See, the great thing about chasing a fat guy is it's an easy getaway. He can't really chase you.
Yeah.
They make all these jokes at the guy's expense, this fat guy getting robbed, and then a cop stops them and goes, "You're under arrest." Under arrest? What for? Penal Code number 5 of the Lathan, whatever. The Good Samaritan Law.
Yeah.
Anyone who sees someone in danger has to help them. So they're being arrested for doing nothing in a show about nothing.
Yeah.
And the whole trial is just a big revolving door of all the previous characters we've met throughout the 9 seasons, basically confirming to the jury that, oh, these guys have been awful, awful, awful human beings the entire time.
Like, they get a whole ton of people back for this.
Oh, yeah. Like, even the clerk who sold Elaine the sponges comes back.
Yeah.
Fucking Babu's back. The bookman, the library cop is back.
The girlfriend with the big tits.
Yeah, Sandra. Sandra's back.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, fuck. We didn't even talk about Jackie Childs at all.
How do we even talk about Jackie Childs? Oh my gosh. I love him.
None of the episodes, I guess, were on our favorites list, but Jackie Childs is wild.
He's so funny. Like, he's like this really wild character, and like he's the lawyer for Jerry in the trial. I wouldn't have Jackie rep me though. I feel like we'd lose the case. I don't know.
I can't even quote him because I can't do those monologues justice.
No.
Anytime he's just like ridiculous and stupid and preposterous, I can't do it.
Yeah.
But fuck, he's great. And yeah, the show ends with them being declared guilty of the Good Samaritan Law, and they have to spend 1 year in jail, and they end the show behind bars. That's the ending of Seinfeld.
And I mean, like, at least they're not in jail the whole time. Like, at least it's like a year. Like, I thought
It's a year.
I thought the ending was really fitting because for the entire series, you see George, Elaine, Kramer, and Jerry just, kind of doing their thing. But a lot of the time, they make things worse. They don't really consider, like, consequences and things and how their actions affect other people. So you end up with a lot of people being mad at them. Like, there's never really been a time where they've personally been held accountable for a lot of the things that they did. And it's really fitting that they get arrested for and put in jail for a Good Samaritan law, because all 4 of those characters are far from being good Samaritans. And I think that, like, the people who argue that, like, oh, they should have had a better ending, and I'm like, but that's not the point, though. If they were, like, declared innocent because of this, that would have been ridiculous. Because that really doesn't justify the pain that the side characters and their girlfriends and everyone else has gone through because of these 4, even though it wasn't intentional, So, like, I thought that, like, that whole ending was justified. And at the very least, they're spending, like, a full year in jail.
Also, side thing, but, like, they also questioned the doctor who announced that Susan had died.
Yeah.
And the Rosses get up and they're like, we knew it was deliberate. You knew those envelopes were toxic. And there's a moment before the verdict comes out where we see Mr. Ross purchase a gun from the gun store.
Yeah.
But I get the feeling that if they were not declared guilty, George would have been shot dead that day.
Oh my god, yeah.
That's so funny to me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. It's not like one of the greatest episodes of Seinfeld to me. Like, I think even before the trial begins, I'm not in love with, like, all the dialogue that happens before that. But, I think it's a fun ending for the characters. I wasn't particularly bothered by it. It's a show that doesn't have hugs, that doesn't have learned lessons or anything.
No,
I
not
thought,
at all.
yeah, that's probably what would happen to those characters, It's probably what they deserve, too.
Go to Friends if you want that fuzzy wuzzy shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the Friends finale was great. The Friends finale was fantastic. Like,
yeah,
everyone got, like, the ending I think that, like, they deserve. So if you want nice, wholesome feelings, go to Friends. But this isn't what Seinfeld is for, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, I like the ending. Don't love it, but I like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun stuff. And, yeah, that's how Seinfeld ends. But we got to talk about our number 1 favorite episode of season 9 before we leave.
Yes.
And mine, and it might be yours, The Betrayal.
Ding, ding, ding. That is also mine.
Yeah, that's an amazing episode.
I know.
It's an interesting episode in that it's played in reverse order.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like Memento, the Guy Pearce movie. Because it starts out with the ending. It starts out with the characters returning to New York, being frustrated and just angry and just having the worst time of their lives. You can stuff your sorries in a sack, mister. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to like 5 hours before, and then 20 minutes before, and then an hour before. And he just keeps going back and back and back and back and back and back and back the whole single time. And you already know how it ends when the show begins, but it's why is it happening that way? What happened to get our characters into India at this Sue Ellen Mishki wedding? What the hell happened to get us to this point? And it's so funny, especially Kramer's plotline, because he pissed off a guy who wants him to drop dead.
Yep.
Wants him to drop dead. And you're wondering the whole fucking time, why? Why does he want him to drop dead? And you keep watching and watching, and it's not until the very end of the show when they cut back to like 4 years earlier, and he fucking nailed FDR with a big snowball.
Yeah.
And that's why, after all this time, he wants Kramer to drop dead. But it's so creative, and I love like the little in-jokes. Like they'll do like little gags where Kramer has a big lollipop that's like really eaten up when we first see it, and then it gets like bigger and bigger and bigger as the show goes on.
I know.
And I believe on the DVD you can actually play it in correct order, chronological order.
Wow. I gotta watch that in chronological order. I feel like it'd just be a normal episode of Seinfeld, though. I love how, like, different it is. Like, I'm a sucker for TV shows taking a spin on different formulas, you know, for stuff. Yeah. It reminds me of, like, that 70s show had a musical episode, which was really funny. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's not a sitcom, but Buffy also had, like, a musical episode that was, like, really cool. Yeah. But, like, I just love it when sitcoms, basically experiment with their narrative and try to find different ways to, like, you know, present their stories, which is also another reason why I like Community, because Community does this all the time. But,
Community's like the most experimental show ever. We're like, we're gonna have a zombie episode. We're gonna have a video game episode. We're in a video game. We'll have to talk about Community one day.
Oh yeah, we have to, because I love Community. But, like, case in point is that, like, I really loved the risks that they took in presenting a backwards narrative, and it worked really well. It really worked. You could still understand kind of, like, the point of the episode and what happened, and how, like, they got to this spot, despite everything being told in reverse order, which is really hard to do.
But it's also improved by, like, a rewatch as well. Like, you rewatch The Betrayal now knowing what you know, and it's like, it makes the jokes even funnier that you know how this actually began in the first place. I love that it ends not with something related to the actual story of this episode, but it ends with the beginning of all Seinfeld, where he shows up in the apartment for the very first time ever, and he meets Kramer in his bathrobe, who he thinks is Kessler. I ordered a pizza. You want a slice? He's like, oh, I couldn't impose. Why not? What's mine is yours. And Kramer goes, really? That is the whole reason Kramer is always mooching food off of Jerry. Because one time, when he first met him, he said, what's mine is yours. Oh, God. I also like that Susan comes back at the end, too.
Yeah.
Final Susan appearance, technically.
Susan's alive. What a nice way to circle back there.
Right? I didn't plan that, but yeah, talking about how that's how Jerry and Kramer met. The final thing we can talk about with Seinfeld.
Yep. And that was Seinfeld.
Love this show. It is so damn funny. Oh my God.
Yep, it's incredible. It's a really good show. Like, I can absolutely see why it's still talked about years later and why it's still memed years later, because there's so much unlimited content that you can take from Seinfeld. Like, I'm part of a Facebook group called Seinfeld Russell Posting. And it's where you take, like, different Seinfeld memes and make them into wrestling references, and I've shown Clement several ones.
It's quite the scene, man.
Compared to different sitcoms that I've seen, it is one of my favorites. It is not my absolute favorite, though, because that still goes to That 70s Show.
Yeah.
That 70s is really sentimental to me, and, like, it's the ultimate comfort food show for me. I wish it was still on Netflix, but it's not, which sucks.
I get the feeling it'll come back soon.
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna come back soon because of that 90s show, and I'm probably gonna watch the whole series all over again when it gets back on Netflix, but, like,
Kurtwood Smith posted a picture of that 90s show, and I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be great.
I know, I'm so excited. It's just that, like, I love all the characters in that show, but Seinfeld would have to be a close second because I really, really loved Seinfeld.
I think it's my favorite sitcom just because it's so consistently good. Like, aside from, like, seasons 1 and 2, you start from season 3 onwards, there's hardly a bad episode. I can't think of, like, an episode that's, like, bad, where I don't want to watch it again, or I skip it whenever I'm running through Netflix. I watch every single episode that runs on Netflix because it's great. And I've never gotten tired of this show, no matter how many times I've seen reruns of it. I must have seen many of the episodes 10 or 20 times. And it's still funny to me. It's like, there are jokes you forget as time passes on, and when you rewatch the show, it's still funny today as an adult, as it was when I was a teenager, as it was when I was a kid. It's mostly timeless. I mean, there's going to be things like video stores and certainly dated technology that, doesn't match up. But, God, it's such a timeless show for what it is. And I'm glad we're still talking about it. I'm glad that it's still being watched on Netflix, still being watched and quoted all the time. Because some shows have been forgotten. Some shows do fly under the radar, and then that's it. No one ever talks about them again. But Seinfeld, no. Still good. Still love it. Still incredible. And if you haven't seen Seinfeld, it's on Netflix now. You have no excuse. It's all on Netflix.
You're assuming that someone who hasn't seen Seinfeld has listened to this whole podcast. I essentially just spoiled the whole show for them.
That's true, but this podcast was for us, damn it. We wanted to talk about Seinfeld, and why not share it with the internet? All 3.5 hours of it.
God damn. That's how long we talked about Seinfeld. Oh my gosh.
I will be editing and trimming out dead air, so maybe it'll be shorter than 3 hours. We'll see.
Maybe.
But it's going to be longer than 2.5. I know that. There's no way it's not. So thanks, viewers, if you've been sticking by the whole entire time, if we've been good background noise while you've been, I don't know, doing homework or cooking a cake. Whatever you've been doing, if you've been listening to us this whole time, we just want to say thank you. And to prove that you've definitely been listening this whole time, you need to say #Serenity now.
Yes.
Serenity now!
Serenity now! Serenity now!
Serenity now. Insanity later. Amazing, none of us had the Festivus episode in the top 5.
The Festivus episode was in my preliminary.
Yeah.
So close to making my top 5.
Because that's like one of the most iconic episodes of that show.
Yeah.
People still quote Festivus all the time. A Festivus for the rest of us! But yeah, Caro, that was fun. It was fun chatting about Seinfeld, but I'm hungry, and we need to end now.
I know, I'm hungry too.
So I'm going to pull the plug on this podcast, and we'll meet up again and talk about something else. By that time, 7 Remake should be up, so that'll be fun.
Yay.
And, yeah, any last words?
I want to leave off on a Seinfeld quote, and I just want to say that a Caro divided cannot stand on its own. I am independent Caro.
And I have been the independent Clement. And we shall see you next time.
Bye. Serenity now.
Serenity now!